Chapter 45-27. When the woman saw Yu, she seemed to be reminded of her daughter. She broke down and cried, "Boo-hoo. I don't want to have another child. I've already lost Duo. She's still so young. Even if she's gone, I can't abandon her. If you ask me to have another child, I feel like I'm betraying Duo. Back then, if she had any symptoms of the flu, I could have sent her to the hospital in time. Perhaps she wouldn't have died so easily." As she spoke, the woman couldn't go on. Obviously, as her husband, he had just comforted her that they could have another child even if they lost their daughter. However, when she saw Yu and thought about how the last time she saw Duo was a cold corpse, her psychological barrier finally collapsed. The man quickly comforted her, Okay. We only have one child. We won't have another child." They had come this time to get their daughter's death certificate. However, when she saw the death certificate, her heart ached uncontrollably. The man was already very sad, but he still had to suppress it and comfort his wife. This flu had taken away their beloved daughter, but it had also taken away half of their lives. When Yu saw them crying, she became even more worried about Xiao Chen. She walked to the doctor and asked worriedly, "Where's my brother? How is he now? Can I see him?" "Your brother's condition is still considered stable. But..." The doctor hesitated for a moment. "If you want to see him, it's a bit difficult. After all, he's now in the quarantine area. You can't go in. I want to see him." As Yu spoke, her voice gradually became choked. "I really miss my brother. I want to see him. Even if it's just once." "You're not sick, right? Can't you still see the patient?" "That's because you're wearing protective clothing. I can wear it too." Yu looked at the woman and then at the man. She said to the doctor, "Do you know why they're so sad? It's because they didn't even get to see their biological daughter even once until she died of illness. The next time they saw her, it was only a cold corpse. This is their lifelong regret." "Doctor, I miss my brother. I want to see him. Please." With that, Yu stood firmly where she was, biting her lip and glaring at him with tears in her eyes. The doctor hesitated for a moment. "I have to ask my superiors." "You don't have to ask for instructions from your superiors." An extremely domineering voice suddenly came from the door. Yu and the doctor turned around simultaneously and saw Mu Yaja and Yun Shishir standing at the door. "Daddy," Mu Yaja looked at him, smiled, and looked at the doctor. "Take us to him." "Chairman Mu, no matter what the consequences are, I can bear it. I can also be responsible for my actions." Mu Yaja paused for a moment and said, "I remember that the protective suits of your hospital were donated by the Xingyu Financial Group. These protective suits are made of imported nanomaterials, so you don't have to worry. Don't let us, the family members, bear the burden of regret because of your courtyard's superficial words." Sigh. The doctor finally sighed. "All right. However, I still have to ask for instructions. My authority is limited. My words don't count. Then please take me to see the director." "Okay." Mu Yaja followed the doctor. Chapter 45-28. The woman who had lost her daughter was crying so hard that she was about to faint. Her tears seemed to have dried up overnight. She could no longer cry, but she was still crying so hard that her whole body was twitching. Streaks of red tears could be seen on her face. "How did this happen?" The woman said sadly, "I thought that everything would get better." Sob. Yun Shishir wanted to comfort her, but she felt that she was in no position to do so. If she were in this woman's shoes, she would have fainted from crying. When a person was really sad, what they needed was not someone to comfort them, but a shoulder to lean on or to cry with them so that they could vent all the sadness in their heart through their tears. This was good too. After a while, Mu Yaja finally returned. Yun Shishir stood up excitedly when she saw him. "What did he say?" "The hospital director has agreed. We can go in and visit Xiao Yichen now. But Yue Yao can't go in. Okay. Even if Yue Yao can go in, I won't agree. She didn't even want Yu to go in with them. However, Yu must be worried sick about Xiao Yichen. If she didn't let him in, he would definitely be angry. After receiving instructions, the three of them couldn't wait to go to the quarantine area. They changed into sterile protective clothing and followed the doctor into the quarantine area. In fact, the quarantine area wasn't as scary as they had imagined. However, because the influenza virus was airborne, everyone who entered and left the quarantine area had to wear thick protective clothing. Even so, there were rumors that some doctors and nurses had died at their posts because they were too tired and didn't take proper protective measures. The first room in front is Mu Yichen's bed. When Yu heard this, he immediately let go of Yun Shishir's hand and ran into the room. When he opened the door, he saw that the heater was turned on. Moreover, he was wearing a mask, so his vision was foggy. Yu didn't have time to wipe the fog off the soft glass and ran to the bed. Xiao Yichen was lying on the bed with his eyes closed. It was hard to tell if he was awake or asleep. He walked over, and the sound of footsteps startled him. Xiao Yichen finally opened his eyes. When he saw Yu, he was shocked. Yu. It's me, brother. He called out. Xiao Yichen felt like he was in a fantasy. Firstly, this was the quarantine zone. How could Yu come in so easily? Secondly, how could this brat obediently call him big brother? Xiao Yichen mumbled to himself in a daze, am I dreaming? Idiot, it's not a dream. It's not just me. Before he could finish speaking, Xiao Yichen saw Mu Yaja and Yun Shishir enter the room. He was even more dumbfounded. Just as he was about to speak, he started coughing violently. Cough, 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 he couldn't stop coughing. When Yu saw this, his heart ached and he was angry. Don't talk anymore. Didn't the doctor tell you to lie down properly? I'm not dreaming, am I? Xiao Yichen was suspicious again. He stammered, how could a brat like you be so obedient and call me big brother? Yu didn't know why, but Xiao Yichen's words sounded like he was teasing him. However, he didn't know why his eyes started to sting. Chapter 45-29. Was he that bad in the past? Yu's tears flowed uncontrollably. Choking, he said, bro. If you can't hear enough, I can keep calling you. When Xiao Yichen saw that Yu was crying, he was at a loss. He felt helpless and tried hard to wipe his tears. However, Yu was wearing a sterile gown and his eyes were like soft glass. There was nothing he could do. He could only say sadly, don't cry. I was just joking. After a pause, he looked in the direction of Mu Yaja and Yun Shishir. What's wrong with you guys? Why are you in the quarantine zone? You're making such a big fuss. I'll think that you're here to say goodbye to me. Don't say such depressing things. Yu pouted and pinched his cheeks gently. Because Xiao Yichen was sick, he could not bear to use too much strength. Who's here to say goodbye to you? We just miss you. Yu's words shocked Xiao Yichen. Oh my god. Was this the arrogant Yu who always said one thing and meant another? She actually told him that she missed him without any hesitation. This was too much. Xiao Yichen pretended to be relaxed. There's no need for that. I'm actually doing quite well. The doctor said that my condition is slowly stabilizing. You're lying. Yu pouted. The doctor said that a little girl whose condition was not as serious as yours had already passed away. Ah, Xiao Yichen let out a short sound. He looked at Yu in shock and disbelief. Are you talking about Duo? Yeah. I don't know if it was this morning or yesterday. Her parents just signed the donation agreement. No wonder I haven't seen her for a few days. Xiao Yichen felt a wave of regret. When he heard that Duo's parents had signed the donation agreement, he could not help but ask, did she really listen to me and donate the body for research? What did you say? I said. Xiao Yichen licked his lips and said straightforwardly, if I really can't be cured because of this flu, I'll donate my body so that the doctors can develop a vaccine as soon as possible. This flu is too annoying. If I die because of it, it won't have a good time either. Xiao Yichen's original intention was to lighten the mood. However, his brain was clumsy and his mouth was thick. The words that came out of his mouth were not very pleasing. Yu Yu pinched his lips and said, don't talk about death all the time. When did I say that all day long? Xiao Yichen pushed Yu Yu's hand away and explained, this isn't bad luck. Everyone who enters this quarantine zone is seriously ill. I also want to get better quickly, but my body isn't working well. There's nothing I can do. When Yu Yu heard this, he suddenly hugged him sadly. I don't care. You have to get better quickly. This is an order. Xiao Yichen looked at Yu Yu and sighed helplessly. He gently patted his head and said, okay, I'll do as you say, Master Yu Yu. Mu Yaja and Yun Shishir looked at the two little guys who were deeply affectionate and were extremely touched. Yun Shishir walked to the bedside and asked worriedly, why did you lose so much weight? I heard from the doctor that you have a bad appetite. It's not that I have a bad appetite. Chapter 45-30. Yun Shishir's heart ached for him. No wonder he had lost so much weight. It wasn't like he had lost weight in a day or two. Had he been like this for so many days? Had he vomited after eating? Xiao Yichen looked at Yun Shishir and asked worriedly, Mommy, did the doctor say that my condition is very serious? Yun Shishir could only sigh, not knowing how to answer. Yu Yu was extremely straightforward. The doctor said that your condition is very serious. He even said that you went into shock once. If it wasn't for the timely rescue, you might have. Xiao Yichen heaved a sigh of relief when he heard this. It seems like I'm quite lucky. Xiao Yichen was naturally optimistic. Even when he heard that he had almost died, he looked indifferent. Yu Yu's heart ached when she saw this. Xiao Yichen suddenly said, oh yes, Mommy, can I ask you for a favor? Yun Shishir looked at him in confusion. What is it? What do you want me to do? If I'm like Duo, can you help me sign a donation agreement? Yun Shishir's body trembled uncontrollably when she heard this. Tears rolled down her cheeks at once. Xiao Yichen suddenly felt a little guilty. I didn't mean to make Mommy sad. It's just that the doctor said that my condition isn't optimistic, so. I was thinking that if there's really no other way, can I be like Duo and donate my body to the hospital? Xiao Yichen, give Mommy some confidence, Yun Shishir said sadly, don't let Mommy think that way. Mommy can promise you that, but don't say such things again, okay? She and Mu Yaja were both open-minded people. They wouldn't object to the donation of a body because of some traditional beliefs. However, this didn't mean that Xiao Yichen could bring it up. Now, no matter who it was, she hoped that they could give her more confidence. Otherwise, she wouldn't be able to hold on much longer. It was like a slow death by 1,000 cuts. Every day, a piece of flesh would be cut off. Every day, another piece of flesh would be cut off. Xiao Yichen was upset when he heard Yun Shishir's words. Mommy, Yun Shishir couldn't help but hug him tightly. Xiao Yichen, it's Mommy's fault. I didn't cherish you when I should have. Perhaps, only when you're about to lose it will you understand how much Mommy owes you. Little Yichen was stunned for a moment before he smiled. Mommy, don't say that. Are you trying to make me cry? You're as important as Yu. We can't lose you, much less lose you. You must not know this, but Yueyao misses you so much that she's gone crazy. She keeps asking to see you, but she's still so young. She can't possibly enter the quarantine zone. Can you bear to see her miss you so much? So you have to get better soon, okay? Xiao Yichen could hold back his tears at first, but when he heard about Yueyao, his tears suddenly went out of control. He couldn't suppress the sadness and uneasiness in his heart anymore. He bit his lip tightly and said hoarsely, Mommy, I miss Yueyao too, Yun Shishir wiped his tears and said helplessly, "You and Yu are a pair of clowns. You're always fighting and can't seem to get along well. Didn't you see how Yu slammed the doctor's table just to see you?" Xiao Yichen turned to look at Yu, but he turned his face away. His cheeks were red. "No. Don't listen to mommy." Chapter 45-31. Xiao Yichen knew that Yu didn't mean what he said, but he was very touched that Yu was willing to do so for him. "It's better not to enter the quarantine zone." Xiao Yichen said to Yu, "I feel that it's very risky. After all, it's better to be cautious." Yu pouted and said, "Then promise me that you'll get better quickly." "I promise you. If I can get better quickly, I'll promise you anything." "I don't care." Yu said domineeringly, "Hurry up and promise me." "Okay." Xiao Yichen rubbed his head and pouted. "I promise you. I promise you." The three of them couldn't stay in the quarantine zone for too long. Yun Shishir reminded Xiao Yichen repeatedly before leaving with Mu Yaja and Yu reluctantly. At the same time, at Hurricane Group, Alice suddenly received news about Gong Jie. The remnants of the sacred shrine have been completely eliminated. However, the leader of the mercenaries who was in charge of Gong Jie's safety replied, "Young Master Jie is also seriously injured. Moreover, with the flu raging, he can't pass through the customs for the time being. The return route to Hurricane Group can't be approved. Also, the FBI is monitoring the hospital. Young Master Jie is being kept in the hospital and can't leave." FBI. Alice held the satellite phone and was puzzled. Why are the FBI people there? Gong Jie was ranked first on the FBI's wanted list and was the FBI's #1 target. They didn't expect Gong Jie to be targeted by the FBI. Damn it. Alice was so angry that she almost threw the phone. If Gong Jie was targeted by the FBI and brought back to the FBI headquarters, he would definitely be sent to military court. Hurricane Group was an important obstacle to international security. As for Gong Jie, international security laws were applicable. Once convicted, the Gong Jie would face hundreds of years in prison. At that time, once he was locked up in the military prison, it would be extremely difficult for him to leave. Alice immediately reported the news to Gong Xiaoying. When Gong Xiaoying heard the news, he said without thinking, "Humph. In my opinion, the remaining members of the Sacred Hall of Light are bait used by the FBI to attract Gong Jie. Where is little Jie now?" "He's in the East African Neutral Hospital. He's currently under the protection of the East African president, but once he leaves the hospital, the FBI will have reason to arrest him immediately." Gong Xiaoying lowered his head and fell into deep thought. The president of East Africa had a good relationship with the Hurricanes. Usually, when there was an armed war, the Hurricanes would provide a lot of military assistance to East Africa. The FBI belonged to the M Federation. Therefore, they did not have the authority to make arrests in East Africa. However, if Gong Jie left the hospital, then anything could happen. With the military strength that little Jie brought, we won't be able to safely cover little Jie's departure for the time being. I'm thinking if I should send some troops over, but the international air route can't be approved. Now that the global flu crisis is over, it's very tense. Gong Xiaoying said, "So what? If they don't approve, then fly over by force and bring him back." No matter how powerful one's background was, if a private jet wanted to fly, it had to be approved by the international air route. However, if they didn't get permission to fly by force, it would be considered a black flight. If it was in local territory, it might not be a big deal. At most, they would face a huge compensation. Chapter 45-32. If they were forced to fly, they might face a small skirmish. It's too dangerous. Alice still had some lingering fears. If we were to be shot down as a terrorist attack, the losses would outweigh the gains. Then can you think of another way to bring Xiao Jie back? Gong Xiaoying asked her. Alice was silent. I didn't expect you to do it like this. No matter what price I have to pay, I want you to bring him back unharmed. Yes. I understand. Alice had just walked out of Gong Xiaoying's room when she saw Hua Jin standing at the door anxiously. When he saw her, he immediately rushed over. I heard that there's news about Gong Jie. Alice was a little surprised. How did you know? Hua Jin was a little helpless. I just eavesdropped on you. I saw you rushing into the study, so I was worried that something had happened to Gong Jie. Alice turned around and looked at him warily. She immediately pulled him aside and warned him sternly, you shouldn't have eavesdropped on my conversation with Master. If he finds out, he'll be angry. Moreover, you're not a member of Hurricane. You shouldn't have eavesdropped on my conversation with him. But you didn't tell me anything. I didn't have time. It was an emergency. Hua Jin lowered his head. Sorry, after a pause, he said, I just heard you say that there's news about Gong Jie. Yeah. But, he's injured. Injured? Hua Jin was even more nervous now. He grabbed her shoulders tightly. Is it serious? Is it life-threatening? It's not a big deal if he's injured, but he's being targeted by the FBI. FBI. When Hua Jin heard this, he was a little confused. What's wrong with the FBI? From what he knew, or perhaps it was because he had been taught in movies, the FBI was the righteous party. Alice narrowed her eyes and looked at him, guessing what he was thinking. Do you think that the FBI is no big deal? That they're the righteous party and won't do anything to Gong Jie? Yeah. What else? You seem to have forgotten. Alice reminded him faintly, Hurricane is not the righteous party. Shao Jia is the crown prince of Hurricane and is also a thorn in the side of the Federal Security Organization. If the FBI catches Shao Jia, he'll definitely be sent to the military court. Military court? Hua Jin grew even more nervous. What will happen then? He'll be sentenced. You can ransom him. Do you think the international court? Hua Jin was even more confused now. Then, if I'm sentenced, how long will it be? A few hundred years, you can understand it as a life sentence. In international law, sentences are accumulated according to the level of the crime. Many war criminals were sentenced to hundreds of years in prison, which was equivalent to life imprisonment. Usually, in a domestic murder case, no matter how many victims there were, it would be considered as intentional homicide. But in the Anglo-American legal system and the international court, every person killed would be convicted of murder. In the end, the criminal punishment for each crime would be added together, resulting in a sentence of hundreds of years. Hua Jin widened his eyes in shock. Hundreds of years. Anyway, the most important thing now is to bring Shao Jia back as soon as possible. That's scary. Hua Jin reacted. How could he forget that Gong Jia was the #1 target on the wanted list? Chapter 45-33. Then what should we do? Hua Jin said, we have to save him as soon as possible. I'll go and approve the flight route first. Alice said, you don't have to worry about anything. Just stay on the island. I want to go too. Alice glared at him. What are you going to do? I can help a little, right? Alice was speechless. You go, as long as you don't drag me down. Okay. I promise that I won't be a burden. Hua Jin thought that she had agreed and made a solemn vow. Alice glared at him, but she didn't have any temper. Anyway, you just stay on the island. Alice left without looking back. Hua Jin looked at the direction she left unwillingly and clenched his fists. Alice, the flight route still can't be approved. East Africa was not a peaceful place now. In addition to the war, there was an outbreak of influenza, and the fierce plague brought about by the war. The epidemic spread, and the international air routes had been blocked, all the routes to and from East Africa. At present, the war was in a stalemate. In addition, the troops of various countries could not enter East Africa. If it's not allowed, then we'll fly by force. Alice gave the order, and the logistics department immediately went to prepare the materials needed for the flight. Alice asked Vermilion Bird to dispatch 3 troops of mercenaries. The number of mercenaries was not important, but the quality. This time, in order to bring Gong Jia back safely, Vermilion Bird dispatched almost all the elites to Alice. They set off at a quiet dawn. Alice calculated the time. If there were no accidents, they would land in East Africa at night. The flight route avoided other countries as much as possible. At present, East Africa had fallen, and it would not pose any threat to the flight and landing. As long as they did not pass through other countries, it should be fine. This kind of thing could not be foolproof, but Alice avoided all the accidents as much as possible. At dawn, the mercenaries boarded the plane in an orderly manner. After Alice counted the supplies and the number of people, she found that there was one more person. He guessed that Vermilion Bird must have felt that this person was not enough, so she sent another mercenary. Thus, he did not think too much and prepared to set off. The hatch slowly closed. Wearing the combat suit, Hua Jin carried the heavy combat bag. Looking at the tightly shut cabin door, he finally let out a sigh of relief. When Alice dispatched the mercenaries, he secretly stole a house, disguised himself as a mercenary, and boarded the plane. Although Alice had repeatedly emphasized how dangerous this trip was, he still didn't care. He didn't know what possessed him, but when he thought of the danger Gong Jia was in, he couldn't stay on the island and wait for his return. He could only repeatedly warn himself not to be a burden to Gong Jia. Even though he knew that his actions were a little rash, but Hua Jin heaved a deep sigh. Beside him, a mercenary spoke. Everyone, be vigilant. We are facing the FBI this time. The FBI is the most treacherous. In order to achieve their goals, they will do anything. In short, be vigilant. Understood. The one who gave the order was a relatively authoritative captain. Hua Jin looked at him and did not speak. After dawn, the sky turned white. The plane finally took off. Chapter 45-34. Hua Jin was jolted awake by a strong jolt. He opened his eyes in shock. The fuselage was traveling through the airflow and was shaking violently. However, the mercenaries beside him were already used to this kind of jolt. They hugged their combat hugs and continued to sleep. They were indeed well-trained mercenaries. Even their sleeping posture was uniform. Hua Jin was a little thirsty. He rummaged in the combat bag for water. Footsteps were approaching. He raised his head alertly and saw Alice looking over. Before he could lower his cap, Alice exclaimed, "Hua Jin." Hua Jin raised his hand awkwardly and waved at her. "Hi, what a coincidence." Alice also raised her hand and slapped him hard on the top of his head. "Why are you here?" And Alice tugged at his clothes in disgust and asked suspiciously, "What's with your clothes?" Also, what's up with your equipment?" Alice snatched his heavy combat bag and opened it. There were all kinds of dry food, snacks, and drinks. His eyelids suddenly twitched violently. I was afraid that there would be no food and water along the way, so I prepared some in advance. Last time in East Africa, he and Gong Jia almost starved to death. That was because he learned his lesson and prepared dry food in advance, just in case. Alice slapped him on the head again. "Ouch! That hurts. Do you want to die?" Alice put on a fierce expression and said fiercely, "You can't even protect yourself. Why are you following us? Why are you joining us?" Hua Jin raised his hand and swore, "I swear, I won't drag you guys down. You have such a big bag full of food. Are you running away? Also, the scariest thing in East Africa is not the FBI, but the plague. Do you know about the plague? If you get infected with the plague, your life will be over." Hua Jin pursed his lips. "Anyway, no matter how much you scold me, I'm still going." No one could stop his will. Alice was startled. She looked at Hua Jin, who seemed to be secretly angry, and sighed helplessly. "Okay, I got it. It's useless to say anything now. You've already boarded the plane. can I still throw you out of the plane? Hua Jin's face immediately changed from gloomy to affectionate, revealing a puppy-like smile. You're still laughing. Hua Jin immediately stopped laughing. Alice turned around and glanced at a man who was staring at her in a daze. She ordered, Jack. Yes. You are in charge of this guy's safety. Jack looked at Hua Jin with disdain. Hua Jin saw the look of disdain in his eyes and pretended not to see it, but he was not convinced in his heart. Was he that weak? Did he have to look at him with such disdain? I don't need anyone to protect me. I can protect myself. Hua Jin patted his combat bag and said, I brought my own gun. When in danger, he would never give in. If he was not convinced, he would fight. Alice slapped him again. Since you're on the plane, you have to obey all orders. Otherwise, if you piss me off, I will really throw you out of the plane. She looked at Hua Jin with a threatening gaze. Chapter 45-35. There wasn't a single light in the hospital ward. The curtains were all drawn, blocking out the bright sunlight outside the window. Gong Jia stood by the window and gently lifted a corner of the curtains. With a strong ray of light, he immediately caught a glimpse of a few blonde men in casual clothes walking back and forth below the hospital. No matter how the FBI disguised themselves, their appearance was too obvious among the tan doctors and nurses. This group of people had been loitering around the hospital floor for so long. It was said that the FBI had gathered elites with high IQ, but in his opinion, their IQ was lacking. However, a fool couldn't win against a large number of people. This time, the FBI had sent over 30 fully armed people. They were determined to arrest him and bring him back to the military court. He put down the curtains and turned around. In the room, a few mercenaries were sitting on the sofa, playing with the guns in their hands. Young Master Jia, your injury hasn't healed yet. Go back to bed and lie down. Gong Jia returned to the bed and sat down. When will Alice arrive? If there are no accidents, she should arrive in East Africa tomorrow. How many people did she bring? 3 troops. That's enough. Gong Jia crossed his arms and leaned against the headboard. He said coldly, when we get back, we'll settle the score with the FBI. The FBI is really shrewd. They purposely leaked the news of the remaining members to Hurricane, and Gong Jia cleaned up the remaining members. The mantis stalks the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. Gong Jia's whereabouts were undoubtedly exposed to the FBI's eyes. However, it was still a little difficult to catch him. This hospital was a neutral hospital. It was not bound by any government treaty, nor was it bound by any international law. This was a hospital set up by humanitarian organizations to stop donations. No official organization could carry out any arrest activities here. The FBI was backed by the Federation, so they had no right to arrest anyone in the hospital. However, it was obvious how determined the FBI was to catch him. If he didn't leave the hospital, they would wait at the door. Was Gong Jia going to stay in the hospital for the rest of his life? Thus, the FBI waited at the hospital all night. Originally, Gong Jia didn't care about the FBI. However, after eradicating the remnants of the Sacred Halls sect, the mercenaries he brought out were greatly weakened. If they were to clash head-on with the FBI, the gains would not make up for the losses. The plane landed smoothly at the airport in East Africa. Instead of calling it an airport, it would be more accurate to call it a wasteland. Previously, the armed forces had wantonly bombed the railways, airports, and all the transportation fortresses into ruins. The plane hovered over the ruins for a long time before landing on a grassy area next to the airport. After the plane landed, everyone got off the plane. Looking at the devastated airport, no one was surprised. They were used to war. Only Hua Jin, he was stunned by the scene in front of him. Living in a peaceful country, he had never thought that war would bring about such cruelty. Even though he had experienced the war personally, East Africa had become like this after not seeing it for such a long time. It was a complete mess, and not a single blade of grass grew. It was said that East Africa had temporarily stopped fighting because of the plague, but no one knew when the war would rage again. The peacekeeping force had already intervened, but now, it was useless. What are you waiting for? Chapter 45-36. Hua Jin asked curiously, are we going straight to the hospital now? Alice frowned and said, let's not go to the hospital first. The flight is tiring. Let's go to the relay station to rest first. Okay. Alice had asked Hua Jin to listen to her no matter what. Hua Jin did not dare to make his own decisions. He was afraid that he would cause trouble for her and Gong Jie. At the same time, good news came from the hospital. The Capital Medical University had successfully developed a vaccine against influenza. After several tests, the success rate of the vaccine was guaranteed. However, it would take some time before the vaccine could be put into use. The safety of the vaccine had to be confirmed before it could be widely used. The entire world was in a state of panic in the 2 months between the beginning of the pandemic and the introduction of the vaccine. The Capital Medical University was the first to develop an inactivated vaccine, which shocked the entire world. No one expected country Z to be the first to develop a vaccine against influenza. At that time, they had only received news that the vaccine was successfully developed. No one knew when the vaccine would be put into use. However, this gave Yun Shishir a glimmer of hope. The successful development of the vaccine meant that the influenza was not invincible. At the same time, she also hoped that the vaccine could be tested and put into use as soon as possible. Xiao Bao's condition had stabilized. The doctor said that his condition would not worsen for the time being. His body was under control, which was the best outcome. However, Xiao Yichen's condition was not as ideal. A week before the vaccine was developed, his condition worsened. Yun Shishir even signed the donation agreement under the doctor's suggestion. When signing the agreement, Mu Yazhe did not mind signing it. However, this was Xiao Yichen's wish. He did not know if he could survive the flu. He did not know if he could wait until the vaccine was developed. During the development period, the development of the vaccine was kept a secret from the public. Xiao Yichen thought that if he did not survive this time, he would donate his body to the Capital Medical University to be used in the vaccine experiment. Yun Shishir could not bear to do that. However, this was Xiao Yichen's wish. That was his body. He had the right to make his own decisions. Although she could not bear to part with it, since it was Xiao Yichen's wish, she had to work hard to fulfill it for him. That night, Xiao Yichen's condition worsened and he was pushed into the operating room. Outside the operating room, Yun Shishir officially signed the donation agreement. After signing her name, she was completely defeated. Mu Yazhe hugged her as they watched over little Yichen, who was undergoing emergency treatment in the operating theater. This was the 4th time this month that Xiao Yichen's condition worsened. Yu Yu carried Yueyao and stood guard outside the operating theater. From the start, he did not expect Xiao Yichen's condition to deteriorate to this extent. He even felt that, apart from Yu Yao, he was in the greatest danger. Little Yichen was in good health, so he would definitely be fine. However, he did not expect that Xiao Yichen, who was in the best condition in everyone's eyes, would fall the fastest and his condition worsened the most. Due to the worsening of his condition, he had not seen Xiao Yichen for a few days. On the contrary, he did not want to see Xiao Yichen now. This was because he knew that if he were to see Xiao Yichen now, there would only be one situation. Chapter 45-37. Yun Shishir couldn't figure it out. Finally, the vaccine was successfully developed, but why couldn't Xiao Yichen hold on? Yu Yu paced back and forth outside the operating theater, holding back his tears. He didn't dare to cry, and he didn't want to cry. He was afraid that if he cried and shed tears, little Yichen would really leave him. Why should he cry when it wasn't confirmed yet? Yu Yu forced himself to calm down. He turned to look at Yun Shishir, who was covering her face and waiting anxiously. However, he couldn't comfort her. Even he himself was worried sick. How could he pretend to be calm and comfort mommy? Xiao Yichen, didn't you always say that we have telepathy? Yu Yu stared at the door of the operating theater and thought to himself, you always said that we don't have telepathy, so I definitely don't care about you. Can you hear my voice now? On the operating table. Xiao Yichen lay weakly on the operating theater. His body was covered with machines and an oxygen respirator. He could vaguely hear a voice calling out to him. Xiao Yichen, can you hear my voice? Xiao Yichen opened his eyes wide. Even though the operating lights were glaring, he still opened his eyes wide. It was Yu Yu's voice. He heard Yu Yu's voice. Yu Yu. He struggled to get up, but the nurse pressed him down. Don't be agitated, doctor, why did the patient suddenly get up? He opened his eyes. He seems to have regained consciousness. The doctors and nurses gathered around. They were a little uneasy when they saw Xiao Yichen's eyes wide open. Could it be the final radiance of the setting sun? Check the patient's heart rate and blood pressure immediately. Doctor, it's not good. His blood pressure is dropping rapidly. His heart rate is also declining. Resuscitate him immediately. Mu Yichen, listen carefully. There was a flash of white light. Xiao Yichen opened his eyes again. However, he was in a daze when he saw an empty darkness. In the darkness, he could vaguely see a thin figure standing there. He was a little confused and couldn't help but walk closer. As for the shadow in the camera, it swayed slightly and actually walked towards him. Xiao Yichen was a little alarmed. He took half a step back until Yu Yu's figure became clearer. Yu Yu? Xiao Yichen's eyes. In his chaotic dream, he even forgot that he was still lying on the operating theater. Since last night, after his condition had worsened, he had been having many dreams. In a trance, he felt that he was in reality for a moment, and in an illusion for a moment. He was gradually unable to distinguish between reality and illusion. When the boys saw him, he ran over excitedly and hugged his shoulders. You're not allowed to leave us. Do you understand? Xiao Yichen was confused when he heard this. What did I do? The doctor said that your condition has worsened. You might not make it. You could no longer pretend to be calm. Her eyes turned red. Mu Yichen, you're not allowed to give up. Do you understand? Who said that my condition has worsened? Xiao Yichen was baffled. Idiot, aren't I fine? Yu Yu stared at his face for a long time before she finally said, Mu Yichen, thank you. Chapter 45-38. Thank you for appearing in my life. But don't leave so easily. It wasn't easy for me to fall in love with a brother like you. Are you going to abandon me for no reason? Yu Yu was a little agitated. Mu Yichen, can you work harder? I heard from Mommy that the Capital Medical University has already developed a vaccine for this influenza. You have to hang in there, don't give up now. When Xiao Yichen heard this, he finally understood what was going on. He looked around and realized that this world wasn't the real world. And Yu Yu wasn't really standing in front of him. It was probably just an illusion. He was critically ill. Was it that serious? He had been in a coma for a long time. Even before he was critically ill, he had been in a coma for a long time and had been relying on the nutrient solution to sustain his life. Perhaps he had been too careless in the past. He had always thought that this influenza virus was probably just a relatively serious cold. When it worsened and became infected with pneumonia, Xiao Yichen, who was optimistic by nature, didn't take it seriously. He felt that he would definitely be able to survive this dangerous period. He believed that he was the chosen one and that God wouldn't make things too difficult for him. Otherwise, he would still be able to easily turn danger into safety after walking through danger so many times. This was just a test. However, the deterioration of his condition was contrary to his optimistic thinking. Gradually, he even needed to use a ventilator to prevent himself from suffocating in his sleep, from being monitored for 12 hours to 24 hours a day, and later, from being able to ingest liquid food to only being able to use nutrient solutions to maintain vital signs. He slowly accepted the fact that this aggressive influenza was definitely not as easy to deal with as he had imagined. As the pneumonia spread, it slowly spread to his other organs. So, wasn't he in the real world now? Yu said to him, "You're in the resuscitation room now. Everyone is waiting for you, so you have to pull yourself together. You can't give up just like that, okay?" Xiao Yichen was a little confused. "I'm in the resuscitation room, idiot, don't you feel anything?" Xiao Yichen did not know whether to laugh or cry. "I really don't feel anything." If not for Yu waking him up, his consciousness would still be in the chaotic space and he would not be aware of his current situation. Yu, don't worry. I'll definitely get better." "That's all talk, I don't believe it. Unless..." Yu suddenly smiled with tears in her eyes and stretched out her pinky finger. "Unless you pinky swear with me." "Pinky promise." When Xiao Yichen saw this, he smiled helplessly and stuck out his pinky. "I really don't know what to do with you. Let's pinky swear then." "Pinky promise. Don't change your mind for 100 years. After Xiao Yichen finished speaking, he couldn't help but ask curiously. Yu, I'm a little curious. You said pinky swear, but why did you have to hang yourself? And not to change for 100 years? Don't tell me that I have to hang myself for 100 years if I promise something to someone." "Because," Yu rolled her eyes and explained helplessly, "hang yourself refers to the amount of strings of money in the past. For example, a string of coins. In ancient times, copper coins were not easy to keep, so they were strung together with a string so that they would not fall. Hang yourself was a metaphor for making a decision and not changing it. Do you understand?" "Okay." Chapter 45-39. You're obviously keeping me in suspense. Yes, I'm keeping you in suspense. Come and chase me if you can. Yu ran far away. Xiao Yichen could not help but chase after him. However, he saw a ray of white light at the end of the tunnel. It was getting bigger and bigger. Yu's figure gradually disappeared into the white light without a trace. Xiao Yichen chased into the depths of the white light. He felt his entire body being enveloped by a scorching light. His body gradually rose into the air. It was as if he was in the depths of an invisible sea. He was slowly floating to the surface. At this moment, it was as if an invisible hand was pulling him down by his ankle. Xiao Yichen kicked with all his might, trying to break free from the restraints on his ankle. However, the hand refused to let go. Xiao Yichen paddled with both hands, trying to float to the surface. However, no matter how hard he tried, he could not break free from the hand. He gradually sank deeper and deeper. "Let go." He kicked with all his might. Finally, the hand let go. Xiao Yichen took the opportunity to swim to the surface of the sea. He looked up, but all he could see was white. Then, he felt as if his soul was being sucked up by a powerful force. Beep, sizzle, thump. His body fell back onto the bed. Xiao Yichen suddenly opened his eyes. A thick layer of mist covered his breathing mask. The doctor was holding the pacemaker. When he saw that Xiao Yichen had finally opened his eyes, he asked in surprise, "How's his blood pressure? What's his heart rate?" "His heart rate is gradually returning to a stable level. His blood pressure is slowly decreasing." The doctor opened Xiao Yichen's eyes and shone his pupils. He finally heaved a sigh of relief. "Little guy, you gave us all a fright. Don't make such jokes in the future. It's a miracle that he woke up. He's already been in the jaws of death for a few rounds. The other side refused to take him in, so he had to come back." Ha! Xiao Yichen's life was finally out of danger. The atmosphere in the operating theater gradually relaxed. "Don't scare us like this again. You know, you're the little celebrity of our quarantine zone. No one wants anything to happen to you." One of the nurses who doted on Xiao Yichen the most walked over and gently tugged at Xiao Yichen's hand. "That's right, Xiao Yichen. Promise us, okay? Once the vaccine is out, you'll be able to leave this place safely." Xiao Yichen was extremely weak. He struggled to break free from the hands of the Grim Reaper, using almost all of his strength. At this moment, he could only nod slightly. He did not even have the strength to open his mouth to speak. Outside the operating theater, the operating lights finally went off. Yu Yu's heart skipped a beat when she saw the lights go off. Yun Shishir was so nervous that she grabbed Mu Yaja's arm tightly, almost pinching it. Even though it hurt, Mu Yaja didn't say anything. He only cared about comforting her. Shishir, don't be so nervous. The lights are off. Where's Xiao Chen? She was so scared. When the door opened, what she had been waiting for was a bed covered with a white cloth. He won't. Don't think too much. Mu Yaja didn't know what the situation was, but the most important thing right now was to comfort Yun Shishir. I'm fine. Don't worry about me. Yun Shishir actually comforted him. The door was finally pushed open. Chapter 45-40. Yu Yu immediately rushed over. Yun Shishir and Mu Yaja also rushed over anxiously. The chief surgeon smiled when he saw how anxious they were and immediately comforted them. The surgery went smoothly. Don't worry, Mu Chen is in good condition now. Really? Yun Shishir's voice became a little shrill because of her surprise. Yu Yu was relieved when he heard that Xiao Chen was fine. He took half a step back and gave Yun Shishir the spot closest to the bed. Since he knew that Mu Chen was in good condition, he was relieved. He was not in a hurry to take a look. Yun Shishir and Mu Yaja surrounded the bed. If it were not for the isolation suits, they would have given Xiao Chen a hug. It was strange. When he first met Xiao Chen, he could not accept him as an older brother at all. As they slowly got along, even though he accepted Xiao Chen as an older brother, deep in his heart, he could not accept that Yun Shishir had given half of her love for him to Xiao Chen. There was no such thing as sharing. Love was limited, just like time. When you gave your love to another person, you would leave less for that person. Yu did not want anyone to share his mommy's love with him. But now, he hoped that Yun Shishir would give Xiao Chen more of her love. If it were not for this life and death experience, he would not have realized how important Xiao Chen was to him. He did not even realize that he was so afraid of losing Xiao Chen. In fact, he had opened his heart to Xiao Chen long ago. It was just that he could not bring himself to say certain things because of his dignity. Perhaps Xiao Chen also thought that he had not completely accepted him. This was because there were some things that others would not know if they were not said. There were some things that the loved one would never know if they were not said out loud. Moreover, he always said one thing and meant another. He clearly liked her, but said that he did not. He clearly loved her, but said that he did not love her. He clearly cared, but said that he did not care. He clearly hoped that Yun Shishir would love Xiao Chen more, but on the surface, he always pretended to be fighting with Xiao Chen for her love. Xiao Chen also misunderstood his words and actions. He thought that Yu cared more about Yun Shishir's love than him as an older brother. Thus, he was very sensible and mature. He withdrew the portion that originally belonged to him. Little Chen must be very lonely after all this time. He was still a child, so he should be more coquettish and unreasonable. However, he was so sensible and mature. He had a steadiness that was not expected of someone his age. Now, he had Yueyao. Mommy's love was going to be cut off again. But, Yu would work hard to fill the void that had existed for so long with his love. Unknowingly, his face was wet. Yu reached out to touch his cheeks, only to realize that he had been crying unknowingly. Perhaps it was because he was too emotional. He was too emotional because Xiao Chen was safe and sound. He wanted to give Xiao Chen a big hug. He wanted to hug him tightly and say to him, Xiao Chen, welcome back. Xiao Chen, welcome back. Chapter 45-41. At the same time. East Africa. Alice rushed to the hospital with a large team. She arranged the police around the hospital and entered the hospital with Hua Jin in disguise. Then, they sneaked into Gong Jie's room. In comparison, Gong Jie's room was relatively safe. However, outside the room, there was heavy security. The FBI had already monitored the entire room. Gong Jie was slightly injured. Although he had passed the critical period, when he was first sent to the hospital, if the wound had not been infected, the FBI would not have had the chance to do so. When injured in East Africa, the scariest thing was the plague and wound infection, as well as the complications after infection and inflammation. Because of the war, there were corpses everywhere. It was also because of these corpses that bacteria and viruses spread wantonly. Hua Jin had just walked into the ward when he saw Gong Jie leaning on the bed in full armor. He was pleasantly surprised. Gong, he had just said one word when he realized that he seemed to be overly excited and immediately restrained himself. Gong Jie did not expect that Hua Jin would suddenly appear. He turned his puzzled gaze to Alice. Alice whistled and quickly distanced herself. It has nothing to do with me. He snuck in himself. Snuck in. Gong Jie was doubtful of this statement. Alice lifted Hua Jin's collar with a look of disdain and the corners of her lips twitched. Please, do you know how he snuck into the army? He stole the mercenary uniform and combat bag, wrapped himself up tightly, and then openly snuck in. I'm convinced that I didn't even notice. Gong Jie's expression turned ugly when he heard this. What are you doing here? Hua Jin casually made up an excuse. I'm just here to take a look. You came to a war-torn area to take a look. Gong Jie snorted coldly. If your words are posted online, you'll be called a brainless idol. Hua Jin heaved a sigh of relief. I'm not a public figure anymore. There's no need for such taboos. When he was a public figure, he had to be on tenterhooks with every word he said. Every nerve in his body had to be stretched taut. Even when facing the camera, every word and sentence had to be prepared by the public relations company. Every word was very meticulous. If it was an ordinary person, even if they made a few jokes in private, it would be harmless and no one would take it to heart. As for public figures, their flaws and strengths would be magnified infinitely. Even if it was an unintentional mistake, he would be consigned to eternal damnation. After leaving the entertainment industry for so long, he still hadn't gotten used to such a relaxed lifestyle. There were no paparazzi following them in the dark, and there were no busy drafts. Gradually, they could speak as they pleased. Alice glanced at Hua Jin from the corner of her eyes and said helplessly, Hey, do you have to be so arrogant? Why don't you just say that you're worried? Hua Jin was still stubborn. Who's worried? When Gong Jie heard this, his tense handsome face suddenly relaxed a little. Oh. You're here because you're worried about me? No. Hua Jin denied flatly and glared at Alice. If you talk nonsense again, you'll what? Chapter 45-42. Gong Jie looked at Hua Jin with a teasing gaze. The latter whistled awkwardly. She made it up. Got it. Of course, Gong Jie could tell that he was lying to him. Hua Jin snorted in his heart. What? Wasn't this man fine? He didn't have a broken arm or a broken leg like he had imagined. He thought that Gong Jie was seriously injured and trapped in East Africa. But in the end, his leg was fine, and so was his arm. He didn't even know how to cry the tears he had prepared all the way here. If he had known earlier, he wouldn't have come. He would have taken such a big risk. But, that was how he acted in a fit of pique. He heaved a sigh of relief when he saw that Gong Jie was fine and had only suffered some minor injuries. He did not know how serious his injuries were, but at least he was not in any serious condition for now. Nothing was more important than a person being fine. Outside the hospital, the FBI has deployed many people. According to my observation, the hospital is surrounded by more than 20 agents. As for how many are outside the hospital, I'm not sure. Alice and Gong Jie sat opposite each other. The huge ward was filled with mercenaries. Gong Jie furrowed his brows in frustration. They won't give up until they catch me. They've schemed so much just to bring you back to the Nuremberg military court. I think those judges are already rubbing their hands and getting ready. If they can put you on trial, they can immediately retire with glory. That's not the problem. Gong Jia looked out of the window thoughtfully. I'm only thinking about one problem now. Huh? Alice looked at him in confusion. What's the problem? Gong Jia looked at her meaningfully. Do you still remember what day tomorrow is? Tomorrow? After he mentioned it, Alice was a little confused for a moment. That's right. Was tomorrow an important day? Alice raised her watch and looked at the date on it. She calculated tomorrow's date, but she couldn't think of anything important. Is there anything important tomorrow? Alice was at a loss. Gong Jia snorted in disdain and crooked his finger at her. Come here. Alice inched toward him curiously, but the man unceremoniously pinched her nose and flicked her forehead. It's my birthday tomorrow, dummy. Alice covered her forehead in pain, but when she heard Gong Jia say that tomorrow was her birthday, her eyes flickered a little. She slapped her forehead again. Ah, how could I forget? It's your birthday tomorrow. Maybe you haven't gotten over the jet lag yet. I think you don't care about this at all. Don't worry. Where's the present? Gong Jia opened his palm to her like a child, asking for a gift. Alice braced herself and replied, I didn't prepare a gift. Gong Jia cast a sidelong glance at her, clearly expressing his dissatisfaction. Behind them, Hua Jin looked at them silently. He felt that there was an indescribable chemistry between the two of them. It was said that the two of them had known each other for a long time and had gone through fire and water together. This kind of chemistry couldn't be cultivated overnight. Moreover, Alice had sacrificed so much for him. Because Gong Jia was infected with the virus, in order to save him, Alice used her own body to experiment on the vaccine. If it weren't for her, Gong Jia wouldn't have been able to survive the infection of the virus. And because her body was affected by the experiment, she lost her fertility. Chapter 45-43. She had never told him about it. Why? Was she afraid that he would feel guilty if he found out? Perhaps, she did not want this matter to bind Gong Jia for the rest of his life. If it were another woman, she might have told Gong Jia about this matter to make him feel guilty. This way, her love would become righteous. Then, what if it was him? If he had sacrificed so much for someone, would he really remain silent? So far, the only person who could make him sacrifice without any complaints was Yun Shishir. He had not dared to think that he would remove his cornea for Yun Shishir. He had not dared to think about it before. He even thought that he would not do it. But now that things had developed to that point, he did it almost without any hesitation. Then, if the same thing happened again and the other party was Gong Jia, would he still do it? To be honest, he did not know if he could do what Alice did. Alice's love for Gong Jia was too heavy and too great. For Gong Jia, she personally brought people and came to East Africa to look for him regardless of the consequences. She loved Gong Jia so much. Why did she not confess to him? If Gong Jia knew about this, what would he think? Hua Jin was deep in thought when he heard Alice say, "You're still thinking about a birthday present at this juncture?" He came back to his senses and looked at Alice. However, he saw Alice looking at Gong Jia with a look of disdain. "It's my birthday tomorrow. I'll have to trouble you. I'll celebrate it with you when we get back to the island." I want to celebrate it." Gong Jia even sighed. "Originally, I wanted to rush back to celebrate my birthday with my sister." He was born on the same day as Yun Shishir. His biggest wish was to celebrate his birthday with Yun Shishir every year. He was afraid that he could not do it this year. Gong Jia could not help but feel a little regretful. "I'll go outside and check if there are any FBI soldiers in the hospital." As Alice spoke, she stood up, looked around, and said to Hua Jin, "You, stay in the ward obediently, do you hear me?" "I heard you." Alice walked out with her men. Hua Jin stared at Gong Jia's back. For a moment, he was in a daze. He was hesitating whether or not he should tell him about it. It wasn't that he was being nosy. Instead, he had the right to know who had risked their lives to save him back then. It was not that he wanted to fight for something for Alice. Instead, it was a personal sacrifice. Although it was not for the sake of getting what he wanted, at the very least, he wanted to let Gong Jie know that he had paid such a huge price. This was the right of Gong Jie. It was also Alice's duty. Similarly, there was one more thing he wanted to confirm. Hua Jin suddenly plucked up his courage, walked in front of Gong Jie, and sat down opposite him. Gong Jie's knuckles, which were holding the teacup, stiffened. He looked at him in a daze. He had a feeling that he had something important to say to him. What's the matter? I think that Alice is actually quite good. Gong Jie was speechless. This sentence, which came out of nowhere, did indeed stun him. Yes, I know that she's quite good. What about you? How do you feel about her? Hua Jin asked again. Gong Jie's lips twitched. What do you mean by how do I feel about her? You've always treated her as a good friend? Gong Jie pondered for a moment and then said seriously, rather than calling her a friend, it's better to call her a comrade. Comrade? Revolutionary friendship. Chapter 45-44. Hua Jin sat down opposite him. I think that Alice is quite good. Gong Jie looked at him suspiciously. He didn't understand why he was suddenly telling him this. Hua Jin continued, Alice may sound mean, but she has a sharp tongue but a soft heart. Gong Jie tapped the table lightly with his fingers. Do you have something to say? Hua Jin licked his lips. I have a feeling that you have something to say, but you're hesitating. It's like this, Hua Jin took a deep breath and said, I think that you owe her a thank you. Gong Jie was stunned. You? Do you know why Alice is infertile? Gong Jie suddenly stood up when he heard this. He grabbed his collar and frowned slightly. You know. He had always wondered why Alice would lose her ability to conceive for no reason. However, no matter how he asked Alice, Alice refused to answer. Gong Jie had also secretly investigated this matter. However, there was nothing fishy about Alice's infertility. If Alice was said to be a woman whose private life was more chaotic, then perhaps because she was too indulgent and had too many abortions, or perhaps because she hurt her body because of her promiscuity, then it would be a different story. Although Alice was very good at talking, in fact, her love and private life could be said to be a blank slate. It was impossible to say that she was infertile from birth. But, as for the reason behind it, she had never mentioned it to her brother. Hua Jin knew the reason. Gong Jie couldn't help but feel agitated. He had always been troubled by Alice's infertility. Hua Jin saw that he was so nervous and asked, Are you very concerned about her? Of course. Gong Jie became anxious and asked, Don't you know? Tell me. Because, Hua Jin gulped and asked again, Do you remember that you were infected with the plague when you carried out a mission? Didn't you get infected with the virus? Gong Jie said, Yes. Hua Jin said, At that time, in order to save you, she used her own body as an experimental specimen. Then, she planted the vaccine in her body. To be honest, I don't really understand this issue. However, I heard that he first implanted the virus into his own body and then experimented with the vaccine on her body. Fortunately, the experiment was very successful. However, because of the infection with the vaccine, the virus destroyed many of her body's skills and she also lost her ability to reproduce. Although she won't completely lose her fertility, if she takes the risk of getting pregnant, there's a 99% chance that the fetus will be deformed. Gong Jie listened silently, and his eyes became darker and darker. She did that? She actually did this for him? No wonder. Back then, when he was infected with the virus, a vaccine for the plague that swept the entire impoverished country was immediately available. He only knew that Alice was one of the main researchers for this vaccine. However, he didn't know that she was the one who took the initiative and used her own body as an experiment. After the vaccine was developed, it had to be tested before it could be used. And Alice was willing to use her own body as an experiment for him. Gong Jia immediately let go of Hua Jin's collar and supported himself on the table, somewhat unable to accept this fact. Chapter 45-45. I wanted to say it too, but, Gong Jia turned to look at her. She didn't want you to say it? This stupid woman. Gong Jia punched the table angrily. Who asked her to do this? She did it to save you. She didn't know that she would lose her fertility because of this experiment. After a pause, Hua Jin continued, but I think that if she were to go back and make a choice again, even though she knew that she would lose her fertility, I think she would still do it. Because. Gong Jia's lips curled into a smile. She likes me. You knew. If I didn't know, I wouldn't be Gong Jia. It was just that he had always pretended not to know. He had tried to make it clear, but Alice didn't confess her feelings. He didn't have the right to say that. He even felt that he had gone overboard. Alice didn't express her feelings, but he still had to reject her cruelly. Alice didn't say anything, but she probably knew that he didn't have any feelings for her. In fact, both Alice and Gong Jia were very smart. Smart people could see through each other's feelings from their words and actions. If two people liked each other but didn't confess their feelings, then they must be idiots. But two people who admired each other were probably like magnets. They didn't dare to be separated by anything. Their admiration for each other would bring them closer and closer to each other. And two people who didn't love each other, even if one of them was wishful thinking, the other would only step back and drift further and further away. Hence, Alice could tell that Gong Jia didn't like her. He had already made it very clear. How could she not know what was good for her? Hence, she didn't tell Gong Jia about this because she didn't want this to become a burden for him. Alice had always thought that if Gong Jia was destined to not be her life partner, then she would be his family. She could always protect him. Anyway, love would eventually turn into family. She didn't want to hold him back. When she found out that Gong Jia liked Hua Jin, she was really gloating. This was her little selfishness. If the man she liked didn't like her because he liked other men, then she still had a chance to comfort herself. Gong Jia sat down at the table with a serious expression. She didn't tell me because she didn't want me to be grateful to her. Yes. Hua Jin rested his chin on his hand. She doesn't want you to know, but I feel that she has the responsibility to tell you, and you have the right to know, don't you think? Thank you. After learning the truth from him, Gong Jia finally breathed a sigh of relief. When Alice finished patrolling the corridor outside the ward and returned to the room, she saw only Gong Jia in the room. She was surprised. Where is he? Where did he go? Gong Jia raised his head and looked at her deeply. Come here. Alice walked over with some hesitation. The corners of her lips twitched. Especially when she saw Gong Jia's serious expression, she felt even more uncomfortable. You. What's wrong? Gong Jia stood up and came close to her. Let me ask you, is it because of me that you lost your ability to conceive? When Alice heard this, she froze on the spot as if she had been struck by lightning. I know everything. If Hua Jin didn't tell me about this, how long did you intend to keep it from me? Chapter 45-46. Alice didn't sound angry. Instead, she sounded powerless and helpless. She had been betrayed by Hua Jin despite trying so hard. She really didn't want Gong Jia to know about this matter. After all, this was a one-sided decision that she had made. Gong Jia wasn't responsible for it. Shouldn't I know the cause and effect of this matter? Gong Jia didn't think much of it. Why did you do that? I don't know. I just did it subconsciously. Alice said, at that time, it was also a spur of the moment. So, I want to hear the truth. Because, Alice shrugged and said in a very relaxed tone, because. I like you. I like you so much that as long as you're alive, I'm willing to pay any price. She was such a simple-minded person. Liking someone probably meant that she wanted him to be good. Actually, this wasn't selflessness. It was just purely, she wanted him to be good. That was all. Alice hurriedly said, I didn't mean to hide it from you. I just didn't want to burden you and make you feel guilty because of this matter. Gong Jie said angrily, do you think I'm worried about you? Or do you think I'll blame myself and feel guilty towards you because of this matter? You won't? Of course not. Alice actually heaved a sigh of relief. That's good then. It's not a big deal anyway. She was finally able to put down the huge rock in her heart. She was really relieved to hear that from her brother. Gong Jie looked at her relieved expression and, for some reason, felt tears welling up in his eyes. Earlier on, he had just said those words out of anger. However, he didn't expect that Alice's relieved expression would make him feel bad. Gong Jie took a deep breath and said, this kind of thing can't happen again. Okay. I also hope that there won't be a next time. Although it's not a big deal, it still took half of my life. Gong Jie finally couldn't hold it in anymore. His heart ached so much that he pulled Alice into his embrace. His throat was already slightly hoarse. You should have told me about this earlier. Alice noticed that his shoulders were trembling slightly, and she couldn't bear to see him like this. If I had known that Hua Jin's mouth wouldn't be reliable. Forget it. I had originally planned to keep this matter from you even if I were to die. But since you already know. Spilled water could not be retrieved. Alice rubbed the back of his head helplessly. Gong Jie, you still blame yourself for this, right? Gong Jie did not say anything. Alice asked again, do you know why I never told you? Gong Jie was still speechless. Because. Alice said faintly, I don't want you to treat me as your benefactor and feel grateful and guilty towards me. You should have told me. What's the point of telling you? Alice shrugged. Don't tell me that if I told you, my body would return to how it used to be. Or would I let you live the rest of your life with gratitude and guilt towards me? There's no need for that. It's not worth it. It's worth it. His lips curled into a smile. At the very least, I'll know who saved my life. Wow, after hearing that, shouldn't I be a little touched? But. Alice finally couldn't help but say, is this the only time I saved you? Gong Jie was speechless. Previously, I saved you so many times, but you didn't seem to thank me much. Chapter 45-47. That's different. Alright, I got it. Alice sighed helplessly. If you really want to thank me, please try your best to make yourself happier. Gong Jie was stunned. Do you think I'm selfless? Alice snorted mischievously. Of course not. I just hope that you can be happier. At least, you can live a peaceful life. Be happy with Hua Jin. Love life. Love life. At least, don't let me down for saving your life time and time again. When Gong Jie heard this, he suddenly laughed helplessly. Finally, he let out a breath that was stuck in his throat. Yes, I will. That's good. Alice asked again, is there anything else? Gong Jie looked at her silently. Alice really couldn't stand his deep gaze. She felt awkward and inexplicably sad. She hurriedly said, if there's nothing else, I'm leaving. With that, she turned around and left the room as if she was fleeing. Until she was far away from the room and in the corridor, she leaned against the wall and heaved a sigh of relief. Unknowingly, her eyes turned red. If she could be more selfish, when Gong Jie questioned her about this matter, she would definitely take the opportunity to confess to him. She would say, Gong Jie, I like you. I love you. It's because I love you so much that I risked everything to save you, even if I had to sacrifice my fertility. Or rather, Gong Jie, since I sacrificed so much to save you, are you going to be responsible for me? She could totally use this matter to ask for a reward. However, she couldn't seem to do it. She couldn't open her mouth. As a doctor, she couldn't make any mistakes during surgery. Even the slightest mistake in the details could lead to unpredictable consequences. It was the same for love. If there was less love, it wouldn't be called love. If it was one-sided love, it wouldn't be called love. She might as well fulfill it. In fact, words like, "I'd rather gong jia like a man than a woman," were all against her heart. They were just said for Hua Jin to hear. But in reality, she knew better than anyone that Gong Jia liked Hua Jin only because Hua Jin happened to be a man. He did not only like men. She couldn't possibly ask Gong Jia to reciprocate her love just because she had sacrificed so much. Being good to a person is voluntary. Similarly, loving a person is voluntary. However, just now, when she said, "I really love you," he almost said it out loud. Alice tightly covered her mouth. For the first time in her life, the urge to cry overcame her reason, and tears suddenly gushed out of her eyes. Hua Jin happened to pass by and vaguely saw Alice leaning against the wall, covering her mouth and biting her knuckles as if she was crying. He walked over worriedly, but when he got closer, he realized that Alice was really crying. What's wrong?" Hearing Hua Jin's voice, Alice raised her head and glared at him fiercely. She sobbed and said, "Hua Jin, you betrayed me." "Huh? Why did you tell Gong Jia about that?" Alice said angrily, "Gong Jia knew about this and came looking for me. I was the one who told him." Hua Jin had a matter-of-fact look on his face. "I think he should know about this. He has the right to know. Why can't you tell him?" "Traitor." Alice was angry when she saw him. Chapter 45-48. Hua Jin said, "You can say whatever you want. Anyway, I think Gong Jia has the right to know about this. What about you?" Alice suddenly became aggressive. "Do you like Gong Jia?" Hua Jin suddenly didn't know how to reply. He turned his face away awkwardly. "Why are you asking this question?" "Hua Jin, do you know that sometimes I really want to beat you up? You obviously like Gong Jia too, don't you?" Hua Jin immediately retorted, "When did I? If you don't like him, why did you take such a big risk and come all the way to East Africa to look for him? If you don't like him, why do you blush every time you see Gong Jia? If you don't like him, why can't you sleep well the whole night because you're worried? Who's here for him?" Hua Jin felt wronged. "I just want to experience what it's like to be a mercenary on a mission." Alice couldn't help but sneer. "So how long are you going to say one thing and mean another?" "How am I saying one thing and mean another? If you continue to say one thing and mean another, I'll really beat you up," Alice said angrily. "The one who's favored is indeed fearless. Have you ever considered my feelings? You clearly know that Gong Jia likes you, and you like Gong Jia too. Why can't you just admit it? Is your reputation so precious? Gong Jia can put down his status as the young master of the Gong family to confess his feelings to you. Why don't you admit your feelings? Is it really that difficult for you to admit that you like Gong Jia?" With that, Alice curled her lips in self-mockery. "Do you know how envious I am of you? You have to know that it's not easy for two people to like each other. Most people, the person they like doesn't like them, and the person they like doesn't like them. They always miss out on love. What about you? Don't wait until you really miss out on love and regret it. What about you?" Hua Jin said angrily, "Aren't you the same? Don't you like Gong Jia? Why didn't you say a word or tell him? Don't tell me you're just going to watch him pass by. Because he already knows everything. Whether I say it or not, the effect will be the same." Hua Jin said angrily, "How would you know if you don't try? What if he likes you a little? There's no need for that. It's different. Even if he knows about it, you didn't tell him about it in front of him. At least, tell him about your feelings." Alice suddenly turned her head and looked at him with tears in her eyes. "You want me to confess in front of him and be rejected once? That's not what I meant, or do you want me to beg for his mercy in front of him?" Hua Jin was at a loss for words. Alice almost exhausted all her strength. It's not a big deal. As long as you work hard, it will be useful. If she didn't like him, she didn't like him. If she didn't love him, she didn't love him. Although no matter what, one had to try their best and struggle a little to know whether there was hope or not, Chu Yunsheng was still in a daze. But this was the only thing that Alice didn't want to struggle with. Her greatest gentleness was not to disturb or force him. Chapter 45-49. Hua Jin looked at Alice in a daze and was silent for a long time. Alice asked, "Life is so short. Isn't it a blissful thing to be able to be with someone you like and who likes you back?" At the hospital, Yun Shishir sat on the balcony. After drying the clothes, she leaned against the balcony in a daze. Mu Yaja walked over and hugged her waist from behind, gently resting his head on her shoulder. "What's wrong? What's on your mind?" "I'm thinking, when will the vaccine be available?" Mu Yaja couldn't help but laugh. "It's not like you're just thinking about it. The vaccine will be available for clinical use tomorrow. But I'm still praying silently in my heart." "Who are you praying to? Jesus? Or Buddha?" Mu Yaja paused and said, "As the saying goes, if you're sincere, it'll happen. If you're not sincere, how can God hear your prayers?" Mu Yaja gently stroked her hair. "All right, don't think so much. I'm worried, just like you. But worrying is useless." Yun Shishir was still absent-minded. Mu Yaja kissed her cheek and hugged her gently. "Tomorrow is your birthday." "Ah," Yun Shishir finally reacted. "My birthday? You were so busy taking care of the little guys that you forgot about your birthday." Yun Shishir said, "How can I be in the mood to celebrate my birthday at this critical juncture? We still have to celebrate your birthday. We don't want to build our happiness on Xiaoyi Chen's suffering. Instead, we have to persevere in the face of adversity and hope for life." Mu Yaja continued, "Besides, your birthday is very meaningful. When the time comes, we'll bake a cake and send it to Xiaoyi Chen. Although he can't be by your side this year, we have to tell him that we hope that he can be there for your birthday next year, the year after that, and every year after that." "Yes." Yun Shishir nodded. Unknowingly, her face was wet with tears. After returning home from the hospital, because she had not been home for a long time, the whole house was filled with a sense of loneliness. He hadn't come back for a long time, so much so that there wasn't even the slightest trace of life left. Yun Shishir hurriedly turned on the lights in all the rooms. The bright light finally brought a trace of vitality to the cold and cheerless home. After Mu Yaja parked the car, he walked into the house. Looking at the lights in the house, he finally felt a trace of warmth. Usually, he had 3 points and 1 line. Hospital, company, home. Usually, Yun Shishir would be at the hospital. Usually, when he came back from the company, he only used the bedroom. When Yun Shishir was not at home, his 3 meals a day were basically settled in the company cafeteria. Both Lu Jinyu and Jiang Shen were a little surprised. Why had boss been going to the company cafeteria every day recently? Isn't sister-in-law cooking at home? Looking at Mu Yaja's depressed expression, could it be that the two of them had quarreled? That's impossible. They are clearly very loving and respectful to each other. They could vaguely tell that Mu Yaja had been preoccupied with a lot of things recently. He was a little absent-minded when it came to company matters. However, Mu Yaja didn't say anything to them. They didn't dare to ask too much. In front of Yun Shishir, he was her husband. In front of Yue Yao, and Xiaoyi Chen, he was a father. It was only in the company that he was a man of flesh and blood. Chapter 45-50. He was also afraid. Guilt seemed to be the last straw, and it was about to crush him. When he thought back to Xiaoyi Chen's childhood, he realized that he was not a good father. He did not care for others, nor did he love others. It was only after he got together with Yun Shishir that he learned how to care for and love children. Thanks to Yue Yao, he was finally promoted to a qualified stay-at-home father. As for Xiao Yichen's childhood, he could no longer make up for it. Xiao Yichen was very strong-willed. He was never willing to say anything, but it could be seen that Xiao Yichen was very envious of both Yu Yu and Yueyao. It was the kind of envy that came from deep within his bones. However, he had always been so sensible. He was so sensible that it made one's heart ache. With such a pity, Mu Yaja was worried that he would never have the chance to make up for Xiao Yichen. At night, negative emotions came and went as one wished. He had not had a good night's sleep for a long time. Now that he was home, he finally felt a trace of the warmth of home. It more or less dispelled some of the loneliness in his heart. He sat on the sofa and looked in the direction of the living room. He listened to the sound of Yun Shishir beating eggs and mixing flour. Yun Shishir did not feel very uncomfortable about the cake. However, she had been practicing her baking skills with Yu Yu. She had also improved a little after killing so many people. After a while, she finished mixing the dough and made a cake embryo. Then, she put it into the oven. An hour later, the cake embryo was taken out. During this time, Yun Shishir had already prepared the condensed milk, mousse, chocolate, Oreo, cookies, and other ingredients. She smoothed the condensed milk and mousse bit by bit. When the final cake was out of the oven, Yun Shishir looked at the cake that was pretending to be perfect and called Mu Yaja over happily. Mu Yaja walked over and looked at the cake. He was very satisfied. Although my skills have deteriorated a little, it's still considered exquisite. I haven't made it in a long time. I'm indeed a little rusty. Yun Shishir dipped the remaining mousse on her finger and brought it to Mu Yaja's mouth. Here, try it. Mu Yaja took a bite and licked it. He raised his eyebrows in satisfaction. The taste is not bad. Right? Yun Shishir was very pleased. At least this proves that you haven't regressed too much. Where's the packaging? Here. The two of them sealed the cake in a box and put it in the fridge. At night, he would not go to the hospital. Gu Jinglian and Chu Ho stayed behind to take care of her, while Yun Shishir and Mu Yaja came back to rest for a while. The two families reached an agreement. Taking turns to keep watch at night, this way, the pressure on the various families would lessen. Although people could rest in the hospital, they were provided with foldable single beds, which were not comfortable to sleep on. If they did not sleep well, it would affect their condition in all aspects. This was especially true during company meetings. There were several times when Mu Yaja dozed off in front of several employees. Lu Jinyu and Jiang Shin were dumbfounded. When they got home, they took a comfortable hot bath. The two of them hugged each other and lay on the bed, feeling extremely comfortable. After so many days of stressful life, they finally relaxed a little at this moment. Yun Shishir lay on Mu Yaja's chest and asked worriedly, will Xiao Yichen really be safe? Mu Yaja opened his eyes. Actually, he was not sure about this, but, I believe that my son is blessed by the heavens. He will definitely be fine. Chapter 45-51. As she spoke, Yun Shishir laughed self-deprecatingly. People only realize how precious that person is when they are on the verge of losing them. Thinking back, Xiao Yichen has always been very sensible. That day when he was critically ill, I was waiting outside the door and kept thinking about it. I feel like I owe him too much. In the future, there will be plenty of opportunities to make it up to him. I'm just afraid that there won't be any more opportunities. Don't say such things that destroy the morale of our own people. Mu Yaja paused for a moment and immediately comforted her. The vaccine has already been developed. Don't think too much. Don't let your imagination run wild. Go to bed early. Okay. Yun Shishir closed her eyes and lay on his chest. It was rare for her to sleep so peacefully. The next day, the sun was shining brightly. The gloomy weather for a few days finally came to an end. The sun was shining brightly and the weather was good. Yun Shishir woke up and drew the curtains. Receiving such warm sunlight, the gloominess in her heart finally dissipated a little. Yun Shishir woke up early in the morning and was busy in the kitchen. Besides the cake, she also had to prepare some dishes. Mu Yaja applied for leave and brought the cake to the hospital with Yun Shishir. Gu Jinglian and Chu Ho were a little confused when they saw that they came with a cake. Whose birthday is it? Yu Yu immediately said, Mommy's birthday. I remember. Yue Yao was also beaming with joy. The atmosphere in the hospital was always oppressive. It was rare that Yun Shishir's birthday happened, so it seemed to add some joy. Since we're in the hospital this year, we won't hold a grand birthday party. Yun Shishir placed the cake on the table and placed the dishes one by one on the table. Chu Ho was very happy. It would be even better if there was wine. Let's drink a few glasses. Mu Yaja raised his eyebrows. There is. He took out a bottle of champagne from his handbag and even brought a wine glass with him. Even if they were in the hospital, the ceremony of a birthday celebration could not be lacking. Yue Yao lay on the table, drooling as she stared at the cake. Suddenly, she asked, then, what about Xiao Chen? Can he eat a birthday cake? Cut him a slice first, and when we're done eating, send this slice of cake to the quarantine zone. Oh. Yue Yao's eyelashes drooped in disappointment. Yun Shishir immediately guessed what he was thinking. He squatted down and gently scratched her nose. Yue Yao, that won't do. If the cake is sent in, we can't eat it. The quarantine area is a sterile area. There are a lot of bacteria outside, so my brother can't come out to celebrate his birthday with us. Yue Yao said, then I'll eat less and leave more for my brother. Yue Yao, be good. You don't have to keep it. The cake is very big. I can't eat too much now. Otherwise, I won't be able to do it if I vomit it out. If he vomited, the blood would flow back into the trachea, which could easily endanger his life. Therefore, he had to rely on liquid food for now. He could only eat a little of the cake. A few mouthfuls would be bad enough. Yue Yao nodded sensibly. Then I'll wish Mommy a happy birthday on behalf of my brother. Yun Shishir was so touched that she kissed her. Yu Yu walked over and gave Yun Shishir a big hug. Mommy. Happy birthday. I wish that you'll always be 18. Thank you, Yu Yu. Yun Shishir kissed Yu Yu. Gu Jinglian and Chu Ho gave their blessings one by one. Because of this accident, the relationship between the two families became much better than before. Especially Mu Yaja and Gu Jinglian, who even knew how to tease each other. Chapter 45-52. Chu Ho inserted candles into the cake. The candles were shaped like numbers, and Gu Jinglian drew the curtains in the ward. The moment he lit the candles, the faint light reflected on Yun Shishir's face, and her gaze was gentle. Chu Ho said, Shishir, hurry up and make a wish. Okay. She had already thought of the wish countless times. Yun Shishir closed her eyes, and a strong wish surfaced in her mind. She wished that Xiao Chen would not miss her birthday again. This wish did not ask for much, but could it come true? Yun Shishir made the wish sincerely and gently blew out the candles. Chu Ho passed the knife to her. Yun Shishir cut a piece of cake and put it aside. This piece was for Xiao Chen. She also cut another piece and put it together with Xiao Chen. Chu Ho was a little surprised. Who is this for? Have you forgotten? And your Xiao Bao. Not a single one of them can be missing. Chu Ho came back to his senses. So you haven't forgotten about Xiao Bao. He had originally thought that Yun Shishir had probably forgotten about Xiao Chen because she had been thinking about Xiao Bao. Chu Ho had originally felt that it was a pity that Xiao Bao would not be able to eat the cake because he was also in the quarantine zone. He had not expected that Yun Shishir would still be thinking about him. This is for Xiao Chen and Xiao Bao. Later, after we finish eating, we'll send the cake to them. Okay. We can't forget about them. After dividing the cake evenly, Yu took a portion for Yue Yao and another for Jing Yang. The little guy was eating with relish. Although cake was not a rare thing, and the little lads had been living in good conditions since they were young, they were sick of eating all kinds of cakes. However, in such an environment, staying in the hospital for so many years, they had to eat nutritious meals. It was rare to have cake in such a boring diet, so it was considered a novelty. Yu even felt that this cake was the best thing he had ever eaten in the world. Yu raised the cake and asked, "Mommy, did you make this cake?" "Yes." "Wow." Yu looked at her with admiration. "This cake is probably the best thing I've eaten since I came to this world." Sure, Mu Yaja could not help but say, "Is it? I feel that my cooking skills haven't changed. You've been eating nutritious meals in the hospital all this time. It's a rare occasion you get to eat cake, so you think it's delicious." Upon hearing this, Yu thought about it for a while. Then, he complained to Sure, "Mommy, Daddy said that your cake tastes awful." Mu Yaja resisted the urge to hit him. "Did I say that? You're trying to drive a wedge between us." "That's right." Yu said eloquently, "I said that Mommy's cake is delicious, but Daddy said that I've been eating too much nutritious meals in the hospital and that's why I've lost my sense of taste." Sure looked at Mu Yaja meaningfully. Mu Yaja explained, "That's not what I meant. But it sounds like that to me." Chu Ho's tone was as if he wanted to see the world in chaos. Mu Yaja opened his mouth but could not say a word. Gu Jinglian also nodded seriously. "Don't explain. Any explanation is a cover-up." As Yueyao ate the cake, Mu Si's mouth was full, but he still nagged, "If Daddy doesn't like Mommy's cake, then Daddy shouldn't eat it." Chapter 45-53. Yueyao was not angry. Instead, she enjoyed Mu Yaja feeding her personally. Yu was amused by Yueyao. "Ha, it's best that Daddy doesn't eat. This way, Yueyao can eat more, right?" Yueyao finished a piece of cake in the blink of an eye. Then, she turned to look at Mu Yaja and opened her mouth wide again. Everyone couldn't help but think of a baby bird waiting to be fed. They straightened their necks and opened their mouths wide, waiting for their mother to feed them. Mu Yaja patiently fed her a small piece of cake. "Delicious," Yuyao happily swayed her head from side to side as she ate the delicious cake. When everyone saw this, they couldn't help but smile. Gu Jinglian's eyes were fixed on her. Chu Ho saw him staring blankly and couldn't help but nudge him on the shoulder. "Why are you staring at someone else's daughter?" Mu Yaja was shocked when he heard this. He quickly shielded his precious Yueyao and looked at Gu Jinglian warily. "What are you doing?" Gu Jinglian was caught red-handed and turned his handsome face away awkwardly. Chu Ho laughed. "I think someone is envious. Envious of having a little princess." Sure was surprised. "Hey, didn't you have twins?" "Jinglian, where's your Qianqian?" At the mention of Qianqian, Gu Jinglian's usually arrogant face was filled with disappointment. Chu Ho laughed even harder when he heard this. "Qianqian is not close to him." "Not close?" Sure looked at Gu Jinglian, who was secretly sulking, in surprise. She then turned to look at the father and daughter, who were snuggling happily in Mu Yaja's arms. She could not believe it. This daughter must be the closest to her father. As soon as she said this, the atmosphere in Gu Jinglian's corner became even gloomier. He took a bite of the cake and said nothing. Chu Ho said helplessly, "Logically speaking, that's what they said. However, Qianqian has also grown up a lot. She can call her mother, brother, and Uncle Fu. She can recognize everyone except for Jing Lian. She cries for me to carry her as if Jing Lian is a demon king." Shure's mouth twitched when she heard that. Wasn't that right? Wasn't Gu Jinglian the great demon king himself? Could it be that his killing intent was too strong? After all, in the past, a simple stomp of the Gu family's feet could cause a bloodbath. Gu Jinglian was ruthless. It was said that the more powerful a person was, the more murderous he would be. Children, on the other hand, were very intelligent. Normally, when they saw someone with a strong murderous aura, they would cry out of instinct. No wonder Qianqian was no longer close to Gu Jinglian. Shure only comforted her, "Jinglian, it's okay. The child is still young. When he grows up, he'll naturally be closer to you. Gu Jinglian didn't know if he should nod or sigh. He asked, was Yueyao close to his father since he was young? That's different. How is it different? Yueyao was taken care of by Yaja since he was young. At that time, I was not in good health after giving birth and he couldn't bear for me to tire myself out. He did everything personally for Yueyao, including breastfeeding him. When Gu Jinglian heard this, he said indignantly, haven't I done enough personally? Chu Ho said, did you take care of the two little guys as well as I did? I cried whenever I got close to them. I couldn't help it. This means that they're afraid of you. Ha! There's no choice. Your daughter isn't close to you. Gu Jinglian was furious. That might not be the case when she grows up. Maybe when she grows up, she'll still be close to me. Just like Yueyao, she's closest to her father. Chapter 45-54. Yu proudly hugged Yueyao's shoulders. I'm the one closest to Yueyao. Yueyao likes me the most, right? Yueyao's innocent eyes darted around, and she immediately slapped her face. No. Yu was speechless. Everyone laughed. Ha 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 ha. Yu felt a little wronged. She reached out and pinched Yueyao's face. She was angry at her heartlessness, but she couldn't bear to hit her too hard. She only asked eagerly, didn't you say that you like Big Brother the most? Not anymore. As Yueyao spoke, she looked at Jing Yang and said in a childish voice, I like Big Brother Yang the most now. Yu looked at Jing Yang resentfully. Indeed. During her stay in the hospital, Yueyao and Jing Yang's relationship was the best. It was so good that it angered both humans and gods. He had been jealous more than once, but because of Xiao Chen, he had been very worried and neglected to take care of Yueyao. Because Big Brother Yang plays with me. Yueyao said, I like to play with Big Brother Yang the most. Feeling the sharp stab in his back from Yu's angry glare, Jing Yang was so scared that he buried his head and ate the cake. He acted as if he was an outsider who didn't know anything and looked innocent. Ha 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 ha. Everyone laughed even more unbridled. No matter who it was, even Yun Shishir, it was rare to see Yu get snubbed like this. Moreover, it was at the hands of Yueyao. However, even so, Yu still couldn't bear to be angry at Yueyao. She looked at Jing Yang with hostility, but when her gaze returned to the back of Yueyao's head, it was full of tenderness. He gently rubbed Yueyao's black hair and said dotingly, anyway, no matter who Yueyao likes the most, I will always dote on Yueyao the most. Brother Ichen dotes on Yueyao too. Yueyao pouted. At the mention of Xiao Chen, she felt a little disappointed. Yueyao, when will you be able to see Big Brother? Yueyao misses him so much. Although her tone was full of dejection and grievance, she did not stop eating the cake. Everyone stared dumbfoundedly at Yueyao, who was happily eating the cake but was also worried about Xiao Chen. For a moment, they didn't know whether to feel sad or laugh. Yu comforted her. Brother Chen will recover soon. Really? Yueyao's eyes sparkled when she heard this. She bit on her cake spoon and looked up at Yu. What about us? Are we almost done? You'll be fine if you eat more. All right. When she heard that she would be fine after eating more cake, Yueyao ate even more happily. Yun Shishir was a little worried. Will you gain weight if you eat like this? After all, there was so much sugar and calories in the cake. Yueyao had standard baby fat. Her face was chubby, and with a pinch, all her fingers could pinch was meat. It was soft and tender, but there was no meat on her body. Her stomach, however, would bulge like a little ball every time she finished eating. Yu hugged Yueyao lovingly. Such a small glutinous ball even had a strong milky fragrance on her body. He had a feeling that this little sister was made of milk. She had clearly been weaned for a long time, but the milky fragrance on her body was still there. Everyone looked at each other and sighed. Only two people were missing from such a joyous and harmonious scene. The 2 cakes were carefully kept and sent to the quarantine area by the nurse. Chapter 45-55. A cake. Xiaobao asked the nurse, whose birthday is it? Mu Yichen's mother. It's her birthday today, so she said that she can't leave you guys behind. Xiaobao was a little envious when he heard that. How nice. We can celebrate our birthdays together. The nurse squatted by the bed and comforted him. Eat this cake and get better quickly. Then, you can leave this place quickly. Okay. Thank you, Auntie Nurse. When the cake was sent to Xiao Yichen's ward, Xiao Yichen had just finished his drip. When he saw the cake, he immediately remembered that it was Yun Shishir's birthday today. He had been isolated all this time, so he didn't know that the date outside had changed. The concept of time had been deeply blurred because he was isolated from the world. It was a little regretful. He couldn't accompany his mommy and sing her a happy birthday song on her birthday this year. When will I recover? He was really tired of this place. Xiao Yichen was vexed. Back then, when he found out that his illness had worsened, he didn't think much of it. He felt that no matter what, he would be able to turn danger into safety. He was never afraid of death. It was also because of this courage that he didn't take the flu to heart. However, he didn't expect that because of this carelessness, he would become the one with the most serious illness. He had been on the verge of death several times. Until now, it was like a nightmare. He wasn't afraid of death. He was only afraid of separation. The nurse said, "Your mommy asked me to pass on a message to you." When Xiao Yichen heard that his mommy had something to tell him, he sat up excitedly. "What did mommy say to me?" She said, "I'll tell you after you finish eating the cake." Xiao Yichen pouted and said coquettishly, "Nurse, tell me first. Don't bargain with me. This is a cake that your mommy personally made." "Why? Don't you want to eat it?" "If you don't want to eat it, can you give it to me?" "No." Xiao Yichen protected the cake that Yun Shishir had personally made. "Anyway, you can't eat this cake. Don't threaten me." "Alright, I'll eat it. Don't eat too much. It's too sweet. It won't be good if you spit it out." "Yes." Xiao Yichen obediently picked up the spoon and took a bite of the cake. The cake was sticky, sweet, and mousse, but she didn't feel sick of it at all. Just the right amount of sweetness. It was so delicious that he wolfed it down. "Eat slowly." The nurse's heart ached as she watched him eat the cake. She couldn't help but say, "Your mommy said, she misses you a lot." Xiao Yichen paused for a moment, and a teardrop fell onto the dining table. He closed his mouth tightly, trying to hold it in, but failed. He carelessly wiped the corners of his eyes. In an instant, his eyes were wet. Because he rubbed them, they were red and swollen. Against his pale skin, it made people's hearts ache. "I miss mommy too." "So, you have to pull yourself together. Your mommy made a wish today, and it must be for you." Wishes couldn't be spoken out loud, otherwise, they wouldn't come true. However, everyone knew who the main character of this wish was. Yun Shishir's wish must have been for Xiao Yichen. She hoped that he would get better soon. Xiao Yichen finished all the cake. Actually, he didn't like to eat sweets, but because it was Yun Shishir's birthday and she had personally made the cake, he decided to eat it. Chapter 45-56. At the same time. East Africa. Due to the war, it was extremely difficult to find the only remaining shop. However, Alice managed to find it. Next to the hospital, there was a very dilapidated dessert shop. There was also a display cabinet selling cakes. However, the conditions were limited. The surface of the cake inside looked like it was smeared with very cheap cream. There were many places that had not been smoothed, and the appearance was not exquisite enough. However, it was not easy for her to find this shop in such a remote corner beside the hospital. There was probably a market further away. However, due to the conditions in East Africa and the recent invasion of war, there were refugees everywhere. Many shops that were lucky enough to escape the war had been smashed and robbed by the refugees. A cake like this was not cheap. It actually cost dozens of US dollars. Due to the war, the country's currency had been devalued. Only US dollars were allowed to circulate in the market. Alice bought the cake back. When Hua Jin saw that she had bought the cake, he found it a little strange. Where did you buy the cake from? A shop in a remote corner beside the hospital. A remote corner, he had already said that it was a remote corner, but she had still managed to find it. Alice paused and said, luckily, it's a remote corner, so it hasn't been robbed clean by the refugees. Many conspicuous shops beside the hospital have been robbed and closed. This place is remote, so it's still open. Oh. It's Xiao Jie's birthday today. Have you prepared a gift? Hua Jin frowned. I have prepared it. What gift? It's a secret. Hua Jin glanced at her coldly. I can't tell you. Why? It's not a gift for you. Why are you so agitated? When Alice heard this, she also asked for a snub and whistled. Humph, it must be some shameful gift. With that, she carried the cake in. In the ward, Gong Jia was leaning against the window and drinking coffee. When he saw Alice carrying the cake in, his eyes widened in shock. Previously, Alice had told her that she was going to buy him a cake. Gong Jia was worried that she might be in danger. Alice even joked that she wasn't on the wanted list. She wasn't him, so why would she be in danger? Gong Jia did not think much of it. Although Alice wasn't on the wanted list, she was still a member of the Hurricanes. Even the FBI knew her. In addition, at this time, there were ruins everywhere. Why would they go to the ruins to find a cake shop? It was simply wishful thinking. He didn't expect that she would really buy the cake back. Unbelievable. This woman was simply omnipotent. Ever since you were young, you could lack anything on your birthday except for cake. Gong Jia was surprised and touched by Alice's kindness. It was so dangerous, but she still insisted on buying him a cake. Cake wasn't a tradition of the Gong family. It was just that after he was young, when he celebrated his birthday with his elder sister, the most important ceremony was to have a cake. Gong Jia was a very ritualistic person. Every birthday, Mu Qingchen would buy them a birthday cake. Although the cake was sometimes big and sometimes small and not enough for 3 people, it was essential to have a cake on a birthday. Chapter 45-57. When it was his birthday, Gong Jia was inexplicably unhappy when he saw that there was no cake. He kept feeling that something was missing. It was as if without the cake, he felt that the birthday was missing a little bit. Every time he saw the cake, he would think of Mu Qingcheng and Yun Shishir. In this way, even if it was his birthday alone, he wouldn't feel lonely. However, without the cake, he would feel that he was really alone on his birthday. It was also from that time that Alice really realized that on her birthday, she couldn't lack anything but cake. Otherwise, she wouldn't have tried so hard to find a cake everywhere. In the end, he really found it. Maybe the taste is limited, but I've seen the production environment. It's quite clean. Gong Jia walked to the table and opened the box personally. A cake that wasn't considered round greeted his eyes. There was nothing new about the production. In China, it was the original appearance of a cake from the 60s or 70s. The cake's cream was mixed with cheap coloring. The wavy pattern was written in English, Happy Birthday. The font was crooked and not exquisite at all. Happy birthday. Alice smiled at him. Gong Jia smiled and gently hugged the back of her neck. He planted a kiss between her eyebrows. Thank you. Hua Jin said. That, Gong Jia turned to look at him. What? Happy birthday to you. Gong Jia paused and suddenly thought of something. Then, where's the gift that you prepared? Hua Jin inexplicably looked a little guilty. I'll give it to you later. What gift? You're being so mysterious. Gong Jia didn't probe further. He casually dipped his finger in some cream and put it into his mouth. It was unexpectedly delicious. It's so sweet. Although it was cheap coloring, the cream was actually not bad. The point was, in a background like East Africa, the food had always been bad. The cake placed here was already considered a luxury. Hua Jin also took a bite. His appetite wasn't as picky as Gong Jie's, but he felt that the cake wasn't delicious. He didn't like cream. This year, only Hua Jin and I will celebrate your birthday with you. Alice looked at the cake again. But we were lucky. No matter what, we still found the cake. She actually still remembered. He couldn't live without a cake on his birthday. Gong Jia was a little touched. He pursed his lips and prepared to cut the cake. Hua Jin stopped him. Aren't you going to light a candle and make a wish? Alice chimed in, yeah, make a wish. Little Jia, make a wish. I don't know what to wish for. Think about it. As Alice spoke, she took out the only candle that the boss had given her and lit it. In the dim candlelight, Gong Jia closed his eyes and made a perfunctory wish. This year's birthday wish is, Hua Jin and Alice looked at him seriously. Gong Jia said, world peace. Hua Jin, Alice was speechless. The two of them tacitly fell silent. World peace? Who was he kidding? They didn't know why, but when this wish came out of Gong Jia's mouth, it didn't sound convincing at all. Hua Jin muttered, with you around, the world won't be peaceful. Gong Jia glanced at him coldly. He casually dipped some cream in it and forced it into his mouth. Eat your cake. Chapter 45-58. He was the biggest obstacle to world peace, okay? 70% of the world's wars were caused by hurricanes. How dare he wish for world peace? When Gong Jia heard this, he glared at him fiercely. Hua Jin suddenly felt guilty and cowered. He quickly raised his wine glass and toasted him. Cheers. That sincere expression of his seemed to be trying to curry favor with him. Gong Jia did not stoop to his level. Alice also poured a glass of wine and clinked it with his. Shao Jia, I'll toast to you. Okay. Unknowingly, half a round of drinking had passed. Alice and Gong Jia had good alcohol tolerance, but tonight, the two of them had finished 12 bottles of champagne. Whether it was Gong Jia or Alice, they were both a little drunk. In the end, they were no longer drinking for the sake of drinking, but for the sake of their lives. Gong Jia was still a little sober, but Alice was already beyond drunk. She pointed at Gong Jia, wanting to take advantage of the night to compete with him. Hua Jin could not help her up, so he had no choice but to contact other people. Only then did they drag Alice away. When he returned to the room, he saw Gong Jia leaning against the floor-to-ceiling window with his head leaning weakly against the window. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Hua Jin walk in, but he did not move. It could be seen that he had drunk a lot, so much so that he was dizzy. His whole body was limp and weak, like a large doll lying limp by the window. Hua Jin walked over and stretched out his hand, wanting to help him to the bed. However, Gong Jia suddenly looked at him childishly, spread his hands, and pursed his lips. He actually had a hint of coquettishness. What? Where's my present? Gong Jia said eloquently, it's my birthday today, and you didn't prepare a present for me? What present do you want? I don't care, I want a present. Gong Jia began to lose his temper. If you don't give me a present, I won't remember. Alright, I'll give you a present. Get up first. Hua Jin was half joking and half fawning. His strength was limited, and drunken people were always scoundrels, so he couldn't do anything to him. Thus, in desperation, Hua Jin tempted him with a birthday present. If you lie down on the bed obediently, I'll give you the birthday present I prepared. When Gong Jia heard this, he smiled meaningfully. You're lying. You didn't prepare a gift for me at all. Gong Jia was suddenly very angry. You don't even know my birthday. How is that possible? Of course I know your birthday. He always remembered Yun Shishir's birthday, and Yun Shishir's birthday was naturally Gong Jie's birthday. He wouldn't make a mistake. He had always remembered Gong Jie's birthday. I promise you, as long as you lie down on the bed, I'll give you your birthday present. When Gong Jie heard this, he really stood up obediently. With Hua Jin's support, he finally walked to the side of the bed and sat down heavily. The soft bed collapsed slightly. The moment Gong Jie lay down on the bed, he hooked his long arm around Hua Jin's neck and pulled him into his embrace. Hua Jin lifted his head from his chest and glared at him angrily. However, he saw him cupping his face and asking seriously, "Where's the present?" God knew how much he couldn't wait to see his present. Chapter 45-59. Look carefully, the gift you want is right here. With that, Hua Jin cupped the man's face in his hands and pressed his lips against the latter's. The sudden kiss made Gong Jie, whose mind was in a mess because of the alcohol, even more dizzy. Originally, he had drunk a few more bottles out of excitement that night, and his whole body was dizzy. Hua Jin's kiss had really wiped out his last bit of rationality. Hua Jin, he actually took the initiative to kiss him. Was his so-called gift referring to this kiss? Or, Gong Jie had no time to think. Almost instinctively, he flipped over and easily pinned him under his body. Pinning the man's hands to the side of the pillow, Gong Jie lowered his head and took the initiative to kiss the other aggressively. Hua Jin's breathing quickened. Only God knew how difficult it was for him to take this step. Ever since Alice said those words to him the day before, he couldn't calm down for a long time. He had always thought that Gong Jie's so-called liking for him was actually just a moment of interest. Most of the liking had nothing to do with love. It was only because of loneliness, because of the desire for warmth, because of a moment of interest. However, after the interest, one would realize that one didn't really like the other person that much. Many feelings were often just the product of loneliness. Hua Jin had always been worried that if Gong Jie knew about Alice's matter, would Gong Jie push him away and be with her because of his guilt towards Alice? However, due to a freak combination of factors, Gong Jie and Alice's attitudes the last time had already made it clear that their friendship would not change. Alice had also told him that it wasn't easy for two people to like each other. Therefore, he had to cherish it all the more. Hua Jin thought that this was why he had to take the initiative to take this step. Therefore, he used this kiss to express his determination. It was, he liked Gong Jie. He didn't want to deny it anymore. This feeling had already existed since the first time they played dare, when their lips touched through a piece of tissue. His feelings for her were definitely not just a moment of interest. However, at that time, he didn't think much of this feeling. He didn't think it was out of love and affection, therefore, he suppressed himself again and again, but he didn't expect that unknowingly, he had already fallen deeply. Liking someone was something that couldn't be suppressed. Especially when the other party also liked him. The more he felt suppressed, the more painful it was. If Gong Jie didn't like him, it would be fine. However, Gong Jie also liked him. Since both of them liked each other, then, let's be together. Don't care about the uncertain future or whether they could walk to the end. Love was in the present. At the thought of this, Hua Jin gently hugged the back of Gong Jie's neck and responded to his kiss even more deeply. Unknowingly, half of the shirt on his body had already been taken off. Similarly, Hua Jin followed suit and removed the man's clothes. In the blink of an eye, Gong Jie's strong shoulders were exposed to the air. For some reason, Hua Jin was so nervous about what was going to happen next that his heart almost jumped out of his throat. Chapter 45-60. Gong Jie suddenly lowered his head and whispered into his ear. There's something I've wanted to say to you for a long time. WH. What, I want, Gong Jie gently lifted his chin and kissed him gently. I want you. This impulse had been brewing for a long time. Hua Jin was slightly startled. However, because of his frantic kisses, he could no longer think independently. The night was dreary. In the room, it was charming and gentle. When Hua Jin woke up again, the sky was dark as ink. Beside him, he could hear Gong Jie's heavy breathing. He drank too much. It was lucky that he did not vomit. When he wanted him, he did not know the main points and did not know how to do it. He hurt him several times. It was like the end of the war. Other than enjoyment, it was more for him to vent. To vent the emotions that he had been suppressing. His suppression, Gong Jie's suppression, in the end, turned into energy that filled his body and was injected into the other party's body. When Hua Jin opened his eyes, he felt as if his whole body was filled with cement. He was stiff and could not move. Even when he raised his hand, he felt that his arm was extremely heavy. So thirsty for water. He felt as if the blood in his body had solidified. After much effort, he finally supported his body and got up from the bed. He turned over and got off the bed. When his toes touched the ground, it was as if there was an electric current flowing through his waist. He staggered, his legs went soft, and he fell to the ground. Hiss! It was so painful. Why did it feel as if his waist had collapsed? It was sore and painful. Most importantly, his tailbone, in particular, was extremely sore. Hua Jin wanted to cry but had no tears. He supported himself on the bed and stood up with difficulty. He walked to the table but could not find water. He walked weakly to the cabinet and poured some cold water. He gulped down a few mouthfuls of water to finally relieve his thirst. He held the glass of water and walked to the window. Through the window, he looked not far away. Even though it was far away, he could vaguely see the ruins filled with smoke. Wreckage was everywhere, as if it was the scene after the apocalypse. The whole of East Africa felt like it was the end of the world. Behind him, there was the sound of Gong Jie turning over. Hua Jin turned around and saw that Gong Jie had turned over and fallen asleep again. He walked over to the bed and squatted down. The smell of alcohol from his breath immediately assaulted his nostrils. She didn't know what he was drinking. Hua Jin clearly hated the smell of alcohol, but the smell of alcohol on his body had a kind of orchid fragrance. He gently touched his face. He always felt that such a face, if placed in the past, would have been unreachable. It was within sight, but unattainable. He always felt that he and Gong Jie were people from two different worlds. Therefore, even if he liked her, even if he adored her, he would always carefully maintain a distance from her, not daring to get close. However, the more he suppressed it, the more painful it was. On the contrary, he was envious of Gong Jie. He liked someone and loved someone, and he was so open about it. He still remembered that he grabbed him by the collar and said to him, "Let's be together." There was no hesitation at all, no overcautious. There was no turning back. Hua Jin was envious of this carefree attitude. Now, he also tried to be carefree for once. The moment he poured out the feelings that he had been suppressing, his whole body felt much more relaxed. Chapter 45-61. 3 days later. Yun Shishir, who had been waiting in the ward, finally received the good news. The first batch of the vaccine had been successfully tested. Xiao Yichen was in the second batch of patients to receive the vaccine. She had heard the news from Chu Ho. During this period, Chu Ho had been following the news closely. Finally, after hundreds of trials, the vaccine had been successfully tested. Yun Shishir could not contain her excitement when she heard the news. Yu Yu was also in the ward. She had just taken her medicine and was a little drowsy. When she heard Chu Ho's words, she immediately sat up in bed. Really? Chu Ho nodded. Yes, it's true. I've confirmed it repeatedly. If there are no accidents, the vaccination will start tomorrow. Xiao Bao is in the first batch, and Xiao Yichen is in the second batch. Really? That's great. She held Chu Ho's hand tightly. She was so excited that her whole body was trembling. Sure, you can rest assured now. The doctor said that if the vaccination is successful, Xiao Yichen and Xiao Bao should be able to leave the quarantine zone very soon. Yun Shishir nodded. However, because they are in the second batch, we don't know if there are any side effects. Yun Shishir's expression became serious when she heard this. Chu Ho said anxiously, I've done some research before. Before this, SARS, which is similar to the influenza this time, had wreaked havoc all over the world. However, after the vaccine was tested, although the patients recovered and were discharged from the hospital, because of the vaccine and the ferocity of SARS at that time, after the patients were discharged from the hospital, the side effects gradually appeared. At that time, due to the large use of hormones to suppress the disease, steroid drugs were used in large quantities for emergency treatment. The side effects of the hormones caused some of the patients' femoral head necrosis, diffuse interstitial fibrosis of the respiratory system and ischemic lesions and necrosis of the femoral head of the motor system. Even though they were saved from the disease, they spent the rest of their lives in pain. Yu took a deep breath when she heard this. As long as he survives, everything will be fine. No matter what pain there is in the future, I will accompany him through it. At most, I'll take care of him. He paused for a moment and continued, however, this influenza is different from SARS. I've done my research on Xiao Chen's treatment plan. I've also analyzed the ingredients of the vaccine this time. There are no harmful ingredients in it. If you really want to list the side effects, it's probably that you'll lose a lot of weight for a long period of time. You'll lose a lot of nutrients because of your body's consumption. Yu spoke with fervor and assurance as he analyzed the situation logically. He was dumbfounded when she heard this. She stared blankly at Yun Shishir and asked in disbelief, how old is Yu? 11 years old. Chu Ho was even more amazed. When she thought about Xiao Bao, who was about the same age as Yu, she realized that there would be no harm if there was no comparison. How did she raise a landlord's foolish son, while other people's sons were so smart? Anyway, as long as this vaccine can cure Xiao Chen, I don't care about anything else. Yu paused for a moment and said, even if his body is damaged because of the influenza, I'll take care of him for the rest of his life. Yun Shishir hugged Yu and kissed his forehead gently. Yu, good boy. Didn't you say that you've studied the ingredients and that there aren't many side effects? Chapter 45-62. Yes, but it's impossible to be foolproof. Even if there are any side effects, Xiao Chen still has us. Yun Shishir was worried when she heard this. However, the vaccine was the best solution so far. Yu comforted her, Mommy, don't worry. Although this is the first batch of the vaccine, we've already done a lot of safety testing. Moreover, the vaccine has been strengthened. We've refined the best parts and removed the dangerous parts. All in all, the vaccine is quite safe. Okay, that's good. At this point, they could only take one step at a time. The vaccine had already passed the phase I clinical trial and Xiao Bao was in the first batch to receive the vaccine. After the vaccination, after 48 hours of observation, the flu symptoms were significantly reduced. After the blood test, the virus was quickly brought under control. Xiao Chen was also in the second batch to receive the vaccine. The surprising thing was that the vaccine seemed to have an amazing effect on Xiao Chen. That night, his fever suddenly went down. From the blood test results, his symptoms were obviously recovering faster than the other patients in the same batch. Unbelievable. The doctors were all amazed. Xiao Chen was really a miraculous child. His illness worsened the fastest and he recovered the fastest after the vaccination. Moreover, after a few days of observation, the vaccine did not have any side effects on his body. The other patients had a strong reaction. Other than vomiting violently and having a high fever, some of the more serious cases even reported that they had lost their sight. 3 days after the vaccination, Xiao Bao also had a reaction. He suddenly had tinnitus. Although it recovered quickly, his immune cells plummeted. In other words, his immune system would become very weak for a period of time. The vaccine killed the bad virus and eliminated the good bacteria. In fact, the adaptability of the vaccine varied from person to person. It had to be said that Xiao Chen was the chosen one. He was one of the lucky ones. The vaccine did not react at all on him. Xiao Yichen's illness was obviously more serious than Xiao Bao's, but Xiao Yichen was the one who recovered the fastest. He was also one of the first people to leave the quarantine zone. That day, Yun Shishir and Mu Yazhe were at the quarantine area's entrance early in the morning, wearing heavy protective suits. Xiao Yichen was also wearing a thick mask as he lay on the bed. The nurse carefully moved him out of the room. Several attending physicians and vaccine clinical professors were especially excited. They personally sent him off and lit up the fireworks. The moment Xiao Yichen stepped out of the quarantine zone, he sat up excitedly on his bed. He looked around as if he was anxiously looking for someone until he saw Yun Shishir in the crowd. His eyes flashed fiercely and he stretched out his arms like a spoiled child, asking for a hug from her. When Yun Shishir saw this, she recklessly rushed out of the crowd to his bedside and hugged him tightly. This hug transcended life and death. It was truly the joy of surviving a calamity. Mommy. It was rare for Xiao Yichen to act like a spoiled child in front of her. Yun Shishir was inexplicably touched. He intimately rubbed against her in her arms. They had not seen each other for so long. A hug could not dispel the longing he had for her for so long. Chapter 45-63. Yun Shishir couldn't bear to let go of him either. The mother and son hugged each other tightly. They wished that time would stop and stop flowing. The doctors and nurses who were standing at the side were moved. One of the professors said emotionally, "Mu Yichen is so capable. He was in the second batch to be vaccinated, but he was the first to leave the quarantine zone. There were adults who were infected with the flu and they were in good health. However, Xiao Yichen was the first to leave the quarantine zone. It was a memorable moment. It was a historic moment. Xiao Yichen was the first person in the capital to overcome the flu. Hence, the professors and doctors were celebrating excitedly. Yun Shishir couldn't take in any of it. She only knew that she could finally hug Xiao Yichen again. She had been thinking about it day and night, and finally, she wasn't disappointed. "Where's Yu?" Xiao Yichen suddenly asked in her arms. Yun Shishir wiped her tears and quietly turned to the side when she heard this. "Over there." Xiao Yichen followed Yun Shishir's gaze and saw Yu holding Mu Yazhe's hand. They stood beside him and quietly looked in his direction. "Go ahead." Mu Yazhe couldn't help but laugh when he saw the two little guys looking at each other. "Do you want to give Xiao Yichen a hug?" "Who wants to hug him?" Yu pouted and complained, "He made me wait for so long and he came out so late." "Who wants to hug him?" Mu Yazhe smiled knowingly when he heard this. This little guy was still so duplicitous even at this moment. God knew how hard it had been for him to fall asleep last night when he found out that Xiao Yichen would be able to leave the quarantine zone the next day. He couldn't fall asleep no matter how hard he tried. He was afraid that something unexpected would happen. Although Xiao Yichen would be able to leave the quarantine zone the next day, Yu was worried that something unexpected might happen. Perhaps, his condition would worsen overnight. He appeared to be very indifferent, but in fact, he was more anxious and impatient than anyone else. Mu Yazhe had no choice but to gently push him from behind. Yu was caught off guard and stumbled a few steps back. He turned around and looked at his daddy with disdain. "Go. Give your brother a hug as a celebration for him." Yu hesitated for a moment before she turned around and walked towards Xiao Yichen. Xiao Yichen quietly watched him walk towards him. He couldn't help but reach out his hands and look at him expectantly. Yu looked at his expectant expression. For some reason, she felt a lump in her throat and her eyes turned red. She took a few steps forward and threw herself into Xiao Yichen's arms, hugging his shoulders tightly. "Xiao Yichen," Yu pretended to be calm. He gritted his teeth, but he couldn't hide his sobs. He forced out a few words. "Welcome, back." Xiao Yichen was so touched that his eyes turned into crescents. Although he was smiling, tears streamed down his face. "I'm home, Yu." Yu, Mu Yichen bit his lip. He couldn't hold back the second half of his sentence. I missed you. Did you miss me? Yu Yu nodded gently and said in a choked voice, yes, I missed you so much. How rare. Yun Shishir and Mu Yaja couldn't help but feel emotional. Yu Yu, who had always been arrogant, had finally said, I missed you. Chapter 45-64. Yun Shishir was so touched that she wiped away her tears. Because of this new lease on life, she thought that she would cherish the happiness of her family of 6 even more in the future. Wealth and power were another matter altogether. Only a healthy and safe life was the most important. Yu Yu and Mu Yichen hugged each other tightly. The two of them turned their heads at the same time and glanced at Yun Shishir and Mu Yaja. Mu Yaja and Yun Shishir walked over and hugged Xiao Yichen and Yu Yu gratefully. The 4 of them hugged each other tightly, and no one could bear to let go. In the ward, Yueyao held a bouquet of flowers and waited eagerly at the door. She woke up very early in the morning. Yun Shishir had already told her that Xiao Yichen would be returning to the ward this morning, and she would bring Yu Yu to welcome him. Yueyao wanted to go as well, but she was too young, and her immunity was not as high as an adult's. Although the vaccine had been developed, Yueyao still tried her best to avoid going near the quarantine zone with her physical fitness. Hence, under Yun Shishir's repeated coaxing, Yueyao obediently stayed in the ward and waited eagerly for Xiao Yichen's return. Suddenly, the sound of heavy footsteps came from outside the door. Yueyao's ears were sharp, and she immediately heard it. She walked to the door excitedly. If she were a little puppy now, her tail would be wagging excitedly. The door finally opened. Yueyao was about to go up to welcome him when she saw Chu Ho push the door open and walk in. When he saw Yueyao standing at the door like a puppy holding a bouquet of flowers, he was dumbfounded. Yueyao immediately wilted when she saw Chu Ho. What? I thought Brother Yichen was back. Chu Ho didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He walked over and picked Yueyao up. What's wrong, little Yueyao? Are you waiting for Xiao Yichen? Yes. Mommy said that Brother Yichen is coming back today. When Yueyao mentioned Xiao Yichen, her face flushed red. She was obviously very happy. Chu Ho lovingly scratched the bridge of her nose. Sometimes, the more he looked at Yueyao, the more he liked her. She thought that it would be great if Qianqian could be as cute as Yueyao when she grew up. Yueyao was quite likable. She was obviously raised like a little princess, but she didn't put on the airs of a princess. Don't worry, Xiao Yichen will be back soon. Just as they were talking, Yun Shishir and Mu Yaja's voices came from outside the door. Sensing that her daddy and mommy were back, Yueyao kicked her legs and said that she wanted to come down. Just as Chu Ho put her down, Mu Yaja pushed the door open. Yueyao hurriedly walked over with the flowers in her hands. Suddenly, she bumped into the operating table that had just been pushed open. With a plop, she fell on her but on the ground. Yun Shishir was shocked when she saw this. Just as she was about to walk over and carry her, she saw Yueyao nimbly get up from the ground. She patted the dust off her butt and walked toward Xiao Yichen. Brother, Xiao Yichen was lying on the bed obediently. When he heard Yueyao's soft voice, he struggled to sit up. He had just been vaccinated and was still recovering. He was weak in all aspects, so when he sat up, he was a little out of breath. Just as he sat up, he saw Yueyao walking toward him with the flowers in her hands. Brother, welcome back. Xiao Yichen was stunned. Chapter 45-65. Yueyao finally peeked her head out from behind the bouquet. She was panting, but she insisted on handing the bouquet to Xiao Yichen. Brother. Welcome back. Moi. Xiao Yichen was extremely touched. He knew that Daddy and Mommy would come personally to welcome him. Yu Yu would also come personally to welcome him. However, he did not expect Yueyao to look forward to his return so much. In the past, Yueyao had despised him as her brother the most. He did not know why, but Yueyao was not close to him. Usually, when everyone stood in a row in front of her, the first thing she would do was let Yu Yu hug her. She would also let Gong Jie hug her. Then, it would be Yun Shishir and Mu Yaja. After that, it would be his turn. However, he only realized now that he was so precious in Yueyao's heart. Xiao Yichen stretched out his arms and hugged the bouquet in satisfaction. Yueyao blinked and smiled. Her face was round and her eyes were like the moon. She seemed to have grown taller and thinner. He wondered if she had suffered a lot while he was not around. Knowing what Xiao Yichen was worried about, Yun Shishir quickly explained, Yueyao and Yu are in the 5th batch of vaccinations. The doctor said that they have already recovered, but to be safe, they can only leave after they have been vaccinated. Xiao Yichen nodded and said, indeed. By the 5th batch of vaccinations, their condition should have stabilized. The doctor said that if Yueyao was older, she could have been vaccinated earlier. At her age, she could only be in the 5th batch. It is relatively safer for her. Okay. Xiao Yichen lifted the blanket and was about to get out of bed. Yun Shishir immediately stopped him. Xiao Yichen, the doctor said that you can't get out of bed yet. It's okay, mommy. Xiao Yichen smiled at her. Yun Shishir's heart softened and she silently retreated to the side. Xiao Yichen flipped over and got off the bed. The moment his feet touched the ground, he took a deep breath and held onto the bed to stabilize himself. He hadn't gotten out of bed for a long time. After lying on the bed for so long, he felt that his limbs were about to degenerate. Not only that, he had not exercised for a long time, and his various bodily functions had deteriorated. Every time he moved, his entire body would ache. Xiao Yichen ignored his own body and opened his arms to Yueyao with a smile. Good girl, Yueyao. Let me give you a hug. When Yueyao saw him get out of bed, she immediately went up to him and called out sweetly, brother. He was so small, so how could he know anything? When he saw Xiao Yichen calling for him, he immediately pounced over without hesitation. However, she pounced on him so enthusiastically that Xiao Yichen, who was already weak, suddenly knelt on one knee on the ground. Yueyao was frightened and immediately used all her strength to support him. She held onto his arm and hugged his waist. She looked as though she was about to cry and looked at Yun Shishir. Mommy, what's going on? Brother seems to be. Xiao Yichen immediately tried to calm her down. It's okay. My legs are just a little weak. Yun Shishir looked at Mu Yaja worriedly. Mu Yaja walked over and helped him up. Is it because you haven't gotten out of bed for a long time? Is that why it's a little difficult to stand? Xiao Yichen nodded reluctantly. With Mu Yaja's help, he finally stood up. Yueyao supported him from the side and placed his hand on her shoulder. Brother, support me. I won't let you fall. Chapter 45-66. Yueyao hugged his shoulders. Even though it was a little strenuous, she still used all her strength to support his body. Yun Shishir walked over and couldn't help but scratch Yueyao's nose with heartache. Brother, are you heavy? Yueyao shook her head and said, no. Jing Yang watched from the side. Ever since Xiao Yichen returned to the ward, he had been hesitant. After hesitating for a long time, he clenched his fists and finally mustered up his courage. He carefully walked forward and asked with a smile, Brother Yichen, do you want me to help? Xiao Yichen glanced at him from the corner of his eye and his face turned cold. Go away. Jing Yang smiled. Okay. He tactfully walked to the side and sat on the bed aggrievedly. Yun Shishir and Chu Ho looked at this scene in a daze. For some reason, they didn't know whether to laugh or cry. It was obvious that Jing Yang wanted to curry favor with Xiao Yichen. After all, he was Yueyao's brother. Especially since Xiao Yichen had finally returned from death's door and successfully received the vaccine, he naturally wanted to welcome him. In the end, Xiao Yichen especially disliked Jing Yang. He and Yueyao were so close that Xiao Yichen was most upset about it. Therefore, he was unwilling to pay attention to Jing Yang. As a senior Siscon, he still hadn't forgotten that Yueyao had neglected him and Yu for Jing Yang. Yun Shishir didn't know whether to laugh or cry at Xiao Yichen's guarded look. Chu Ho whispered, Why do I feel that it will be difficult for Yueyao to get married in the future? Yun Shishir glanced at her and didn't react for a while. Look, Yueyao has two brothers who dote on her so much and a father who dotes on her. Whoever wants to marry Yueyao in the future will have to conquer these three men. It's enough for him to suffer. After Chu Ho mentioned it, Yun Shishir also realized it. She sighed helplessly. In our family, Yueyao is the most precious. I'm also worried that he won't be able to get married in the future. Yaja is still fine. When Yueyao was born, he was like a slave to his daughter. Now that I've brainwashed him, he's much better. However, those two guys, Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen, won't let Yueyao suffer in the future. Yes. I really don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing. Yun Shishir shook her head. It can't be anything good. When he grows Yueyao, Yichen, he will definitely have a family's family. If he does, Xiao Yichen and Yichen will definitely not get along with their brother-in-law. On top of that, Yaja is such a difficult father-in-law. For some reason, after hearing Yun Shishir's words, Chu Ho suddenly sympathized with Yueyao's future husband. He's still young. When he grows up, perhaps it will be better. Yun Shishir shook her head. No, the older he grows, the deeper the bond between the three children will be. Actually, everyone has always felt that Yueyao Yichen and Yu Yu is too dependent on Xiao Yichen and Yu Yu. But in reality, Xiao Yichen and Yu Yu are too dependent on Yueyao. Yueyao Yichen has a special meaning to them. A special meaning? Chu Ho didn't understand. What special meaning? Chapter 45-67. I understand now. Chu Ho continued, actually, Xiao Bao feels the same way about Qianqian. However, he likes his younger sister very much, but he doesn't like his younger brother at all. Yun Shishir was surprised. Why? Maybe it's because, the same sex attracts and the opposite sex repels. That was a perfect answer. Yun Shishir couldn't stop laughing. The atmosphere in the ward was joyous and harmonious. It had been a few days and the ward had been gloomy. Now that Xiao Yichen was back, the cheerful atmosphere finally returned. When Xiao Yichen returned to the ward, he was still on the same bed. Although he couldn't leave the hospital for the time being, at least everything was stable after he was vaccinated. Although the public was still in a state of panic about the spread of the flu, they were still optimistic about the vaccine that was released this time. The atmosphere in the hospital was no longer lifeless. All the patients had new expectations for their lives. Soon, Xiao Bao came back with the good news that he could leave the quarantine zone. On the day that Xiao Bao left the quarantine zone, he was in good condition. Although he was in the first batch to receive the vaccine, he came out 2 days later than Xiao Yichen. The doctor confirmed it again and again, and Chu Ho also asked about it. Overall, Xiao Bao's condition was good and stable, but it was slightly worse than expected. As long as he was given more nutrition, there would be no problem. When Xiao Bao came out of the quarantine zone, Xiao Yichen had almost recovered. Ever since he left the quarantine zone and returned to the ward, Yun Shishir was full of energy. Every day, she would eat fish soup and bones to nourish Xiao Yichen's body. She couldn't wait to quickly recover in 3 to 5 days. Xiao Yichen regained a lot of energy after eating so much fish and meat, as well as fruits and vegetables. Therefore, not long after, he could get out of bed and jump around. Xiao Yichen's physical strength had decreased a lot after he was born with the disease, so he started to exercise after he recovered. He had to do 100 sets of push-ups every day. When Xiao Bao came out of the quarantine zone, he was even sicker than Xiao Yichen. He lay on the bed, unable to move at all. If it weren't for Xiao Yichen, Chu Ho would have been worried sick. However, when he thought about how Xiao Yichen had been like this when he came out and how he was still as lively as ever under Yun Shishir's care, Chu Ho wasn't worried at all. The welcoming ceremony was naturally very grand. When Xiao Bao was pushed into the ward, there were fireworks and a small Corolla made by Yueyao. However, Xiao Bao couldn't do anything other than lie on the bed. Chu-ho walked over to Xiao Bao with heartache and picked him up. Xiao Bao said weakly, "Mom, can you fulfill a wish of mine?" "What wish?" Xiao Bao pouted and tears almost fell from his eyes. "I want to eat ice cream." Everyone was silent. There was a long dead silence. Xiao Yichen was the first to laugh. "Ha ha 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 ha. Ice cream." Xiao Bao's first goal after coming out of the quarantine zone was to eat ice cream. Chu-ho didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Xiao Bao cried out pitifully, "In the quarantine zone, no one let me eat ice cream. I haven't eaten ice cream in a long time." Chapter 45-68. Chu-ho did not know whether to laugh or cry. She could not bear to see him like this. However, given Xiao Bao's current condition, he could not eat ice cream. Hence, she had no choice but to coax him. Okay. You can eat ice cream after you've completely recovered, okay?" Xiao Bao did not give up. "I want to eat it. I want to eat it. I've been holding it in for a long time. I feel like I'd rather die without ice cream." When Yu heard this, she mocked, "Impressive, Xiao Bao. You actually know how to use idioms. Looks like my training of you wasn't in vain." "Humph." Xiao Bao ignored Yu. Xiao Yichen said, "Let him eat it. I think he can't wait to go back to the quarantine zone." Xiao Bao was instantly terrified. What does eating ice cream have to do with going back to the quarantine zone? The doctor didn't let you eat ice cream because if you eat it, it's cold and sweet. If your cough recurs and you develop pneumonia, you'll have to go back. Ha ha ha. Xiao Yichen said, "Eat it, eat it. Do you want me to buy it for you?" Yun Shusha reminded him weakly, "Xiao Yichen, you can't leave the ward yet. Then Mommy will buy it for him." Xiao Bao suddenly snorted in a fit of pique. "Forget it. I'm not eating it." Everyone smiled knowingly. Xiao Bao was probably the most cowardly and afraid of death among this group of children. There was no use in making threats and promises. If they told him directly that eating ice cream would worsen his condition, it would mean that he would have to be on countless drips and injections, and that would be enough to scare him. Xiao Bao raised his hand to show Chu-ho the dense needle marks and the residual needles on his hand. He sought comfort. "Mommy, look at my hand." After being on the drip for a long time, both his arms were slightly swollen. Due to the long period of infusion, the needle in his left hand was almost gone, so he switched to his right hand. If his right hand wasn't enough, he switched to his forehead and instep. In short, Xiao Bao felt that when he drank water, water would seep out from these densely packed needle holes. Xiao Yichen disagreed. "Tisk, tsk. How delicate. I get more injections every day than you do." "What did I say?" Xiao Bao glanced at Xiao Yichen with a gloomy expression. "Who wants to be compared to you? You're not human. What kind of normal child would play with a gun? What kind of normal child would practice handstands in the ward when he was so ill?" "Mom, I'm telling you, Xiao Yichen is a pervert. For a period of time, he did handstands in the ward every day." At that time, Xiao Bao was already paralyzed on the bed, and it was difficult for him to get up. Suffering from the flu and lying down for a long time, she was basically lifeless. Xiao Yichen explained, "At that time, I felt weak all over, so I thought that I should exercise. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to get out of bed." Yun Shusha was speechless. The doctor and nurse had already told her about this. Xiao Yichen thought that his muscle weakness was caused by being bedridden for a long time. Therefore, he forced himself to do handstands and push-ups. Even when his condition worsened, he could still do a few sets a day. What was even more perverse was that his appetite was not bad. It was so good that it made one's hair stand on end. It was because he ate too much that he vomited after eating, and his stomach almost burned out. Actually, the muscle weakness was caused by the long period of infusion. In addition, he didn't have enough nutrition, so he couldn't eat and drink too much. He could only eat in moderation. Chapter 45-69. Every time the nurse saw him, the latter would be stunned. Yun Shishir even suspected that his good health had been damaged because of him. Today is a day worth celebrating. Chu Ho had always been serious. Now that Xiao Bao was finally released from prison, she smiled happily. Today is the day that the two little guys are reborn. No matter what, it would be great if we could have a good drink tonight. Yun Shishir's eyes lit up when she heard that. That's a really good suggestion. Mu Yaja said, it would be even better if there was red wine. Chu Ho shook her head. It's such a hot day. Why don't we drink beer? It'll relieve the heat and we won't get drunk easily. Yun Shishir seemed to have figured something out. In that case, Chu He's alcohol tolerance doesn't seem to be very good. Chu Ho retorted, better than you. Yun Shishir suddenly turned her head and said to Mu Yaja, let's have a good drink tonight. Okay. It's rare to be so happy. After such a long period of worrying, Yun Shishir felt uneasy day and night and found it hard to close her eyes. Now, she could finally breathe a sigh of relief. Her desire to drink was so strong. Mu Yaja heard that and patted her head helplessly. I know. Let's have a drink. I'll make an exception for you tonight. Okay. Chu Ho suddenly said, I know a really good place. At night, it's quiet and the wind is comfortable. Also, no one will disturb you. Yun Shishir reminded him, you can't leave the hospital. It's in the hospital. Where? You'll know tonight. Chu Ho said mysteriously. At night, Yun Shishir went to the supermarket to buy a lot of cooked vegetables. They were the kind that had been processed and could be eaten directly. Although they weren't exquisite and were relatively cheap, most office workers who didn't have time to cook would go to the supermarket to buy cooked vegetables. The taste was definitely not top-notch, but it was still not bad. After buying cooked vegetables, a case of beer, peanuts, and kimchi, the group of people entered the hospital under the cover of the big meal. Chu Ho led a group of people to the balcony of the hospital. It turned out that the perfect place she was talking about was the hospital's balcony. It was big and spacious. During the day, many doctors and nurses would wash their work clothes and dry them here. At night, all the clothes would be taken away, leaving only the bare clothes rack. After moving the clothes rack away, Yun Shishir spread out the soft cushions she bought on the balcony. It was a very large area, and the group of people sat on it. Xiao Yichen and Yu Yu were the first to lie down. As the night breeze blew, they felt extremely comfortable. So comfortable. When Chu Ho heard this, he said proudly, comfortable, right? What do you think about this place? Mu Yaja praised from the bottom of his heart. I'll give you a first-class merit. Everyone sat down on the cushions. Yun Shishir couldn't wait to put the fragrant cooked vegetables on the small table one by one. Mu Yaja opened the can of beer. It was the first time he and Gu Jinglian had eaten like this. Although many of the cooked dishes looked strange, the aroma and the fact that they were really hungry stimulated everyone's appetite. These are pig's ears. Try it. Yun Shishir urged Mu Yaja. Mu Yaja picked up one with his chopsticks and put it in his mouth. It was very chewy. It was fragrant and crispy. It was surprisingly delicious. Is it good? Chapter 45-70. Mu Yaja was a little surprised. He did not expect these cooked dishes, which cost more than 10 yuan per serving, to be so delicious. Perhaps it was because he was in a good mood as he sat on the balcony with the night breeze blowing. After all, Xiao Yichen had come back from the gates of hell, so he had put all his worries aside. He felt that the burden on his shoulders had suddenly been lifted. Therefore, he felt that whatever he ate tasted better than sitting in a 5-star hotel or a 3-star Michelin restaurant. Gu Jinglian was also in a good mood. Although he usually despised Xiao Bao to death, Gu Jinglian often had nightmares when Xiao Bao was sick. He often comforted himself that Xiao Bao was lucky and would not be defeated by a mere influenza. However, Xiao Yichen's critical illness had also frightened him. Perhaps one would only know how to cherish something when faced with loss. Ever since Xiaobao returned to the ward, Gu Jinglian's attitude towards him had become especially gentle. It was to the extent that Xiaobao was a little uncomfortable. Sure enough, he was used to being abused. Being treated so gently all of a sudden made him uncomfortable all over. He missed the old Gu Jinglian who used to be so rough with him. Chu Ho thought to himself, this father and son pair, one is a sadist and the other is a masochist. Come. Yun Shishir held a bottle of beer and raised it high. Let's celebrate the glorious return of Xiao Yichen and Xiao Bao. When everyone heard this, they laughed and raised the bottles of beer in their hands. Cheers! Cheers! Ding! 5 or 6 bottles of beer clinked together. Everyone was in a good mood and finished the beer in one gulp. Xiao Yichen watched as Yun Shishir gulped down the entire bottle of beer. He also felt a little hungry. He tugged at her sleeve and said, Mommy. I want to drink beer too. Children are not allowed to drink. Chu Ho had just taken a sip when he suddenly realized what was going on. He exclaimed, what kind of beer is this? Yun Shishir raised her eyebrows and said, I bought it casually. The beer should be the same. This beer has a strong aftertaste. He took a closer look at the logo and was left speechless. Wusu beer. On the label, the words, Wusu, were especially eye-catching. Yun Shishir was a little startled. What's wrong? Wusu beer. I think this beer is quite expensive, so it should be delicious. Cough. This is Wusu Wusu. Wusu. Yu was shocked. Killer Wusu. Wusu Wusu Wusu, it could not. How could a supermarket sold Wusu Chu? He held her forehead and explained, turn the bottle upside down. Wusu, in other words, NN, in Wusu. Wusu Yu of Wusu, Wusu, then NNNN, what's wrong? Is there something wrong? Some people jokingly say that the English words on the label are the abbreviation for, kill you all. Pft, Mu Yaja understood. This means that the aftertaste of this beer is very strong. For people who are not used to drinking it, the aftertaste is quite strong. Chu Ho thought to herself. No wonder the taste was so familiar. She had drunk a bottle when she was at work and the aftertaste was unusually strong. She did not feel anything at first, but when she was full and stood up, she felt a lack of oxygen in her brain. Then, she felt as if she was walking on air. This beer actually doesn't taste that good. It's so expensive, Gu Jinglian complained. Chapter 45-71. Weird taste. Gu Jinglian mocked. Chu Ho didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Why? You're not used to it, so you won't allow others to say that it's good? Gu Jinglian said, it tastes so bad. Yun Shishir put her hands on her hips and said, I was the one who bought the beer. He dares to say that it doesn't taste good. Ha ha ha. Yu and Xiao Yichen looked at each other and laughed knowingly. Beside them, Yao took advantage of Yun Shishir's carelessness and secretly took a sip of the beer. She frowned when she tasted the beer. Wow! It tastes terrible. Xiao Yichen quickly snatched the beer back from Yao and said angrily, you've learned how to drink secretly. You little rascal. I thought it would taste good, but it turns out to be so terrible. Yao frowned in disdain. Everyone was amused by her and burst into laughter again. Yun Shishir hugged the beer bottle and looked up at the night sky. The moon was full. The happiest thing in life was a family reunion. She gently rested her head on Mu Yaja's shoulder and sighed comfortably. East Africa. At the hospital. Suddenly, there was a burst of thunder outside the window. Hua Jin suddenly woke up and sat up from the bed in shock. What's going on? Calm down. Gong Jia was sitting by the window and looking at the smoke outside. They're fighting again. They're fighting again. Yeah. Hasn't the war already stopped? Gong Jia smiled mysteriously. The war stopped because the military had run out of ammunition and food. With the intervention of the international organizations, there's no more ammunition. Since there's no war preparation, why are they fighting now? Because, Gong Jie said meaningfully, Hurricane gave them enough ammunition. Hua Jin was stunned. Gong Jie had stayed in the hospital for so long without making a move. He had asked everyone to wait carefully because he was waiting for this. He took advantage of this period of time and ordered Hurricane to provide all the ammunition to the war maniacs at the relay station in East Africa. Then, he wanted to take advantage of the chaos to leave this barren land. Then what should we do now? It's about time. Gong Jie turned around. Hua Jin saw that he had been armed from head to toe while he was sleeping. Clean and tidy combat uniform, long combat boots, bulletproof armor, and a full set of equipment behind his waist. Gong Jie looked especially dashing in his uniform. More importantly, his handsomeness was not just superficial. The reason why the FBI had assigned so many people to be on standby was because they knew that Gong Jie was a formidable target. So they had to be on their guard. This is your bulletproof vest and combat uniform. Also, you just need to carry these 2 guns with you when you follow me. One was a rifle and the other was a pistol. Hua Jin was not proficient in firearms. These 2 guns were only for self-defense. Hua Jin braced himself and equipped himself with both guns. He asked with some concern, "Will I be a burden to you?" Gong Jie glanced at him coldly. "Of course you will." Gong Jie said unhappily, "I told you to stay in Hurricane but you didn't. So you came all the way to East Africa just to be a burden to me?" "Of course not." Hua Jin held the rifle and frowned. "I'm worried about me." "Yeah." Chapter 45-72. I'm not as weak as you think. "But," Hua Jin said seriously, "Alice looked very nervous, so I thought you were in danger." "She's not wrong. If I were to be arrested by the FBI and sent to the military court, it would be troublesome. But how could I let those idiots arrest me so easily?" Alice was confused because she was concerned about him. "All right." Hua Jin raised both his hands in surrender. "Just take it that I'm causing trouble for you." Gong Jie looked at him deeply and suddenly walked in front of him. He stretched out his hand, held the back of his neck, and gently rested his head on his chest. "I'm very happy that you're here." Hua Jin listened to his powerful heartbeat and his uneasy mood calmed down a little. "Gong Jie, have you really decided?" You've decided to be with me." Hua Jin was still a little doubtful. Why did you decide to be with me?" "I don't know. When it comes to relationships, no one can be sure. I was wondering why my sister would like a guy like Mu Yaja." After a pause, Gong Jie closed his eyes. "But now, I'm relieved. Whether it's liking or being moved, it's usually a matter of a single thought." A single thought, Hua Jin couldn't help but smile. Is this what love at first sight means? Gong Jie pursed his lips. "Is it? I only know that I really hated you when I first saw you." Hua Jin, hated? Hua Jin was doubtful. "Why do you hate me? Why do you have to monopolize my sister?" Gong Jie frowned slightly. "My sister belongs to me alone. Why should she have a younger brother like you?" "Oh," Hua Jin replied. It's like this. At that time, I had a very special feeling for Shishir. At first, I thought that I must have fallen in love with her to have such a special feeling. Later on, I realized that the kind of warmth she gave me was the kind of warmth that belonged to a family. Perhaps it was because I didn't have any concept of family since I was young, so being with her gave me a sense of belonging. Plus, she's a little older than me." Upon hearing this, Gong Jie's usually cold eyes instantly softened. "From now on, wherever I am, it will be your home." When Hua Jin heard this, he was deeply moved. "All right, it's settled then." The two of them looked at each other. At this moment, Alice's voice suddenly came through the radio. "Little Jie, it's time to act." Gong Jia put on his headset and replied expressionlessly, "Gather at the port in half an hour." "Yes. Be careful." After Gong Jia finished speaking, he turned to Hua Jin and said, "You follow me. Don't act on your own, understand? Do you need me to shoot?" "No need. Then these two guns, when I'm down, it'll be time for you to protect me. Do you understand?" Hua Jin nodded. Gong Jia walked to the window, pulled open the curtains, and counted down in his heart. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, boom. There was a loud explosion. The artillery shell blasted a huge crater 300 meters away from the hospital. A row of houses were on fire. Originally, there was a shelter for refugees near the hospital. Now, all the refugees had gathered at the hospital, and it had become a wasteland. In the hospital, someone screamed hysterically, "Air raid! It's an air raid!" Chapter 45-73. The air raid alarm went off instantly. Outside the corridor, doctors and nurses were rushing around. "Quick! Everyone gather and take refuge in the hospital's air raid shelter. There's an air raid. Everyone, pay attention." This hospital usually accepted the wounded from the war. Originally, in the war-torn zone, there was a shortage of resources and medical equipment. They could only treat some external injuries. Refugees who were infected with the plague were not accepted by the hospital. Most of the patients were either missing an arm or a leg. With the help of the nurses, they struggled to run to the underground air raid shelter. Gong Jia grabbed Hua Jin's hand and broke through the door. As soon as he broke through the door, Hua Jin saw the long corridor full of injured people. The corridor was packed with people. "There are so many people. Follow me." Gong Jia pulled Hua Jin and stuck close to the wall. They avoided the panicking injured people and finally arrived at the staircase. Unlike those who were using crutches or supporting the injured with broken arms, they had all four limbs and were able to move freely. They went down to the first floor in no time. Gong Jia saw the FBI agents guarding the entrance at a glance. All of them had blonde hair and blue eyes. They were particularly eye-catching in the crowd of dark-skinned people. Gong Jia and Hua Jin, on the other hand, were conspicuous. The FBI agents also noticed them immediately. Reporting, "Target spotted. Attack. Execute the arrest plan." A few blonde men broke through the crowd and walked toward Gong Jia and Hua Jin with difficulty. Gong Jia turned around and glanced at the floor-to-ceiling window in the corridor. He pushed Hua Jin away a little. Then, with a powerful roundhouse kick, he shattered the floor-to-ceiling window. Crash! The glass shattered all over the floor. Gong Jia grabbed Hua Jin's hand and rushed out with him. Behind them, they heard American English with a New York accent. "Don't hurt the refugees. Attention. Unless absolutely necessary, don't shoot. Don't hurt the target, don't hurt the innocent." When the FBI carried out their plan, they first had to comply with international security laws. No matter how special the situation was, they could not harm refugees or citizens of other countries. This was also part of Gong Jia's plan. Create chaos. Taking advantage of the chaos, they could shake off the FBI's pursuit. In fact, things were going according to his plan. Gong Jia held Hua Jin's hand and rushed through the crowd to find his men guarding outside the door. Two of the mercenaries had already driven a car over. When they saw Gong Jia and Hua Jin running over, the car immediately started. Gong Jia helped Hua Jin into the car first. The engine had already started and the car was already more than 10 meters away. He ran a few steps and jumped into the car. With one hand on the car door and the other holding the gun, he turned around and saw the two agents chasing after him at lightning speed. He took out his gun, aimed at one of the men's knees, and shot twice. When the other agent saw that Gong Jia was about to leave, he couldn't hold back anymore. He raised his wrist and aimed his gun at Gong Jia's knees. Hua Jin saw it, but before he could shout, Gong Jia had already made the first move. Bang! He shot that man's wrist. Ouch! The car quickly shook them off. Gong Jia got into the car and slammed the door shut. He smoothed his messy hair and finally heaved a sigh of relief. Hua Jin asked, "Are we safe now?" "Not yet. Before we board the ship, we are still in danger." Gong Jia turned his head and looked at Hua Jin. "Are you scared?" Chapter 45-74. There was a kind of superstition about him. He always felt that Gong Jia, this name, this man, was omnipotent. As long as he was here, even if the sky fell down and the world ended, he would protect him and ensure his safety. The car drove towards the port. Hua Jin suddenly asked suspiciously, "Will there be FBI agents at the port?" "I don't know." Gong Jia looked at the back of the car through the window and did not see anyone chasing after them. Now that there's a riot, those American guys should be panicking. After Gong Jia said that, Hua Jin still did not let down his guard. Until the car reached the port, everything was unbelievably smooth. Alice was already waiting at the port. When she saw Gong Jia and Hua Jin, she immediately walked over. Here again, Hua Jin held his forehead with a headache. "The last time I was here, I think I was kidnapped to East Africa. Not long after, I'm revisiting the old place. Don't tell me you can't bear to leave East Africa and refuse to leave." "No." Hua Jin immediately showed a frightened expression. "I can't wait to put on my wings and leave this place." "Alright, cut the crap. Hurry up and get on the boat." Alice kicked Hua Jin's back and chased him onto the boat. Feeling aggrieved, Hua Jin turned around and glared at her resentfully. "Violent woman. If you continue to talk nonsense, I won't use this to chase you onto the boat." As Alice said that, she pulled out a gun from her waist belt and aimed it at him. Hua Jin was so frightened that he quickly shrunk his shoulders and boarded the boat. Gong Jia stepped onto the boat ladder and turned around to look at Alice. He wanted to say something but stopped. In the end, he did not say anything. Alice looked at him and suddenly smiled. "Why are you looking at me?" "Nothing." Gong Jia casually threw the gun at her. Alice caught it and shook her head helplessly. She took the opportunity to clip the gun behind her waist. With just a glance, they understood each other's intentions. Alice exhaled, turned around, and boarded the ship. The armed cargo ship gradually left the port. Hua Jin leaned against the bow of the ship and looked at the distant mountain peak. Peace is great. It's great to live in a peaceful country. Life was too fragile. Therefore, he had to cherish the present and grasp the present. Gong Jia walked to his side and leaned against the bow with him. He gently bumped his shoulder and asked, "What are you thinking about?" "I'm thinking that it's precisely because life is so fragile that we should cherish it even more." Gong Jia smiled deeply. "You don't have to cherish life. You just have to cherish me." "What do you mean by cherishing?" "Seize every minute and second of being together." Gong Jia rarely said such romantic words. Hua Jin was flattered. He stared at him. Suddenly, he leaned over, put his arms around the back of his neck, and kissed him deeply. He rarely took the initiative to kiss him. Gong Jia smiled and hugged his shoulders. While enjoying the kiss, he also deepened the kiss. This was a kiss after surviving a disaster. It was also a kiss that Hua Jin had been late for a long time. Under the setting sun, Gong Jia and Hua Jin kissed tightly. The warm rays of the sunset poured down on their bodies, softly plating their figures with a layer of gold. They were so beautiful that they looked like sculptures. Alice stood at the head of the lower deck. Separated by the railing, the sea breeze blew on her face. It had been a long time since she felt cool. Chapter 45-75. In a dilapidated house in the capital. It had just rained heavily, and even the air felt damp. In addition, there was also the smell of green grass in the air. Bai Ran did not like this smell very much. She sat in front of the table by the window and looked out of the window in a daze. She did not like the wet grass smell in the air, but she had to open the window to get some fresh air after the heavy rain. The table in front of her was very old. When she was studying, this table was piled full of review questions and homework. After graduation, it was cleaned up a little and became a simple dressing table. There were some cheap skincare products on it, the most basic moisturizing products. A facial mask was only 5 yuan, but it was still a little extravagant for her, who had just graduated and only had a salary of 4 to 5,000 yuan. She did not dare to be too extravagant. She applied it once every 4 days, on her face, neck, and knees. In short, she made the best use of everything. Although she had just graduated and her salary was not high, Bai Ran had been very vain since she was young. Sitting in front of the mirror, Bai Ran looked at her face in the mirror and was slightly lost in thought. The 24-year-old Bai Ran had already grown into a slender and elegant woman. She looked like a beauty. Bai Ran. Are you ready? Someone shouted outside the door. Bai Ran gently patted her face that was stiff because of nervousness and hurriedly stood up. Yes, I'm ready. She walked into the narrow living room and saw a middle-aged woman waiting for her. Seeing that she was wearing ordinary clothes, she could not help but feel a little disgusted. How can you dress like this for such a big event like a blind date? Don't you think it's embarrassing? Auntie, I don't have any nice dresses. This is the most decent one. Bai Ran paused and asked tentatively, so it's another blind date? How many blind dates have you had this week? You know. Since you know, don't let me down. You're not young anymore. It's better to get married early. Bai Ran said weakly, Auntie, I'm only 24 years old. Marriage is not urgent, right? You're not in a hurry, but I'm not in a hurry. How long do you want me to take care of you? Bai Ran's breathing suddenly became rapid. There were several times when she wanted to leave this house, but she had just started working and did not have much savings. It was not easy to save a few thousand yuan, but it was not even enough to pay the rent. The memories of his childhood were already very distant. She vaguely remembered that when she was in kindergarten, her parents had left her in a car accident, along with the child she was pregnant with. Overnight, there was only one person left in the warm home. However, the pain of losing his parents was not as deep as it had been with the passage of time. After that incident, she lived with her grandparents and returned to her hometown to study. However, when she was in junior high school, her grandfather passed away from lung cancer. On the 7th day of her grandfather's death, her grandmother died of a myocardial infarction due to the heavy blow. She died suddenly in front of her grandfather's memorial tablet. From then on, she was kicked around like a ball in front of her uncles and aunts. In the end, it was her youngest aunt who was merciful and took her to her side, providing for her food, clothing, and education. His aunt's surname was Jiang. In order to settle down, Bai Kun temporarily followed his uncle's surname, Jiang Bai Kun. Chapter 45-76. However, after graduation, her aunt kept urging her to go on blind dates. There was a premise to this. Her aunt had a son, but he was not proficient in his studies and did not even pass high school. In the end, after graduating from technical school, he did not do a proper job and always stayed at home playing games on his computer. Little aunt had placed all her hopes on her. However, Bai Ran had just graduated from university. As a fashion designer, how much could she achieve as a fledgling? Therefore, this conservative woman felt that it was useless for a woman to study until university. It was better for her to get married as soon as possible. However, blind dates were definitely not that simple. This little aunt had conditions for the blind date. The first requirement for the person she found for Bai Ran was that he had a successful career. Even if he did not have a successful career, he had to be rich. As a betrothal gift, a house in the capital had to be transferred to her son's name. The first blind date was with a demolition family. A house in the capital had been demolished, and he was worth hundreds of millions. However, he was divorced and had a child. The second blind date was with a small boss, but he was old. She had gone on blind dates several times, and he was not younger than 35 years old. Byran was angry. What did they take her for? Every time she protested, her aunt would take it for granted. She had raised her for so long, studied in the capital, and spent money on food and clothes. Now that she was of age, shouldn't she repay her? Her uncle's family was in the capital and they were old citizens. Other than the old and broken house left behind by their grandparents, their son was getting married, and they did not have a wedding house. Which girl would be willing to marry a man who did not do a proper job and had no education or ability? And a family of 4 squeezed into a 50-square-meter house. Byran was young and beautiful, so she was naturally the target of her aunt's expectations. Byran naturally brushed off the first few blind dates. She thought that she could finally stop. Not long after, she found another person for her. Today, she did not know how to brush it off. Byran took the address and walked out of the neighborhood. Suddenly, she felt very sad. She just wanted to do her job properly. Yi Yuqin watched Byran leave the neighborhood with a gloomy face. What sin have I committed to bring back such a money-losing thing? If she drives away the blind date today, I will definitely chase her out with a broom. A middle-aged man's lazy voice came from behind. What kind of person did you find for her today? Yi Yuqin turned around. She was quite satisfied at the mention of her blind date. I heard that he's the boss of a renovation company. He's quite rich and agreed to my conditions. He has seen her photo. As long as she agrees, any condition is negotiable. Who knows, she might have angered them away again. She's really capable in this aspect. She dares. Yi Yuqin was infuriated. I was having a good conversation. She dares to push me away again. They took the bus to the subway and finally arrived at the cafe in the city center after passing through the crowd. After the rain, the sun soon came out, and it became a little stuffy. This cafe was one of the more famous ones in the capital. Sitting in the cafe, Byran added the man's WeChat and sent a message, I'm here. Wait for me, I'll be there soon. Chapter 45-77. Temperament was really a magical thing. Just by looking at this handsome back, she could vaguely imagine that it should be a young and handsome man. She retracted her gaze and looked out of the window, only to see a middle-aged balding man hurriedly passing by the window. She looked at him until she saw him walk into the coffee shop. Suddenly, she had a bad premonition. Byran stared blankly as the man walked in front of her and said in a very apologetic tone, Sorry, I'm 5 minutes late. Did you wait long? Ah. No, I just arrived too. Byran's face stiffened as she clenched her fists. She actually didn't have any expectations, but she didn't expect that her aunt would find a man of this age for her. The man politely raised his hand, tucked his sparse hair behind his ear, and sat down. Do you want something to drink? I'm fine. Milk coffee, is that okay? Yes. The man called the waiter over and ordered 2 cups of coffee and some desserts. Then, he turned his head and looked at the girl opposite him. It could be seen that the Byran opposite him was young, immature, and had a hint of immaturity. Her appearance was beautiful and exquisite. Most importantly, her temperament was excellent, with a hint of scholarly aura. It was said that she was a graduate of a famous university. In that case, her brain was also very bright. For a businessman like him, when looking for a partner, he also looked at the other party's education. The man smiled and said, Let me introduce myself first. My name is Mo Kong. I'm 39 years old this year. I've been married twice before, but I don't have any children. What about you? Byran lowered her eyes and didn't look at him. Byran, 24 years old. I just graduated. Do you have a job? Yes. Let me tell you about my general situation. The man began to introduce himself. From the renovation company he ran, the size of its scale, the annual benefits, how many apartments he had in the capital, how much the property fee was per square meter, how much the property fee was per square meter, how much the car he drove, and even the annual insurance premiums of the car would be taken out to brag. His mouth, other than a mouthful of teeth that were yellowed by smoke, was filled with a strong sense of superiority. The more Bai Ran listened, the more disgusted she became. The man was boasting while paying attention to Bai Ran's expression. However, he didn't see any yearning or interest on her face. Instead, he saw a kind of boredom. What happened? The man asked with concern. I've said so much, but you haven't told me about yourself. Bai Ran sighed. Mr. Mo, to tell you the truth, this blind date with you was forced by my aunt. Yes, I know. The man said with a knowing tone. Bai Ran continued, actually, I haven't decided to get married yet. The man's face stiffened. You don't plan to get married? Are you rejecting me? Or, did you want to use this opportunity to raise more conditions? Bai Ran took a deep breath and said, you're very good. I can't match you. So, Mr. Mo, why don't you look for someone else for the blind date? She wanted to end this blind date in a perfunctory manner. After she finished speaking, she was about to pick up her bag. Just as she was about to get up, the man's face suddenly darkened. You and your aunt are singing the same tune. Are you playing with me? No.